The King's Avatar audiobook by Kevin The King's Avatar Volume 4 Pursuit Chapter 261 You Have to Love the Game. In the blink of an eye, the day had grown bright and Ye Xiu stretched his arms. At this time, no one in his group was still playing. Tang Ru had gone off the earliest. After running desolate land 3 times, she went asleep. Ever since the day that where she and Chen Guo went shopping, she had changed her sleep schedule. She wouldn't stay up all night until day came like Ye Xiu did. She would go to sleep earlier, but wake up earlier than Ye Xiu also. Whenever Ye Xiu woke up, he would always be able to see her and Chen Guo sitting together and playing Glory up until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which was when Tang Ru had to take the shift. After Tang Ru went offline, Concealed Light finally was unable to continue arguing bitterly with Steamed Bun Invasion and decided to duel Steamed Bun Invasion in the arena. Ye Xiu was dragged along by Steamed Bun Invasion and forced to spectate the match. Ye Xiu really didn't need to watch to know the results. With Concealed Light's skill level, there was no way he could fight against Steamed Bun Invasion. Concealed Light fought 10 matches and lost 10 matches. Nothing unexpected had arisen. Ha 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 ha, now you know my strength. Being your senior is actually quite troublesome for me, not you. After exiting the arena, Steamed Bun Invasion was absolutely delighted, while Concealed Light was completely silent. For Steamed Bun Invasion, who could find fun during any moment, beating up a noob clearly didn't make him feel bad in any way. Steamed Bun, don't be too complacent. Ye Xiu felt that he had to say a few words. You started training earlier than he did. Bullying Concealed Light, who just started learning, isn't something you should be too happy about. Ha ha, I was prepared to teach him well, but this little boy refused to accept me, so I had to teach him a lesson. How about it, little Concealed Light? Am I good enough for you? Ha 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 ha. Steamed Bun Invasion continued to be proud of himself. Who would believe that he actually wanted to teach someone? He was clearly feeling good about beating up a noob. All right, that's enough. You go and play. Ye Xiu shooed away Steamed Bun Invasion. He turned around and saw that Concealed Light was still standing there stupidly. Don't be discouraged, you've only just begun, Ye Xiu said. Yeah, I know. That's good. Give me a sec and I'll send you some stuff. Okay. After that, he spent 2 hours searching, arranging, and categorizing. The materials he had gathered weren't only useful to Concealed Light. Any other player who liked Glory would find them useful too, however. These types of specialized drills were extremely dull. Normal players wouldn't be able to persist, and if you didn't persist, no type training was effective. The materials Ye Xiu had gathered were especially fitting for a beginner such as Concealed Light. Actually, these types of specialized drills were a bit difficult for beginners. However, in Ye Xiu's eyes, for a beginner like Concealed Light to have such a solid grasp of theory meant that he was very tenacious and wanted to improve his own skill. When Steamed Bun Invasion bullied the noob, Ye Xiu watched with one eye open and one eye closed. He wanted to see just how motivated Concealed Light was to improve. After receiving the materials, Concealed Light thanked Ye Xiu, who reminded him about the important points. As for how to use them, Ye Xiu felt that it wasn't necessary to tell someone who studied things so meticulously. After sending Concealed Light his portion, Ye Xiu glanced at some more documents. While arranging the materials, he also found a few programs that could be specially used for Tang Ru's and Steamed Bun Invasion's training. However, when Ye Xiu thought of Steamed Bun Invasion's misdeeds, Ye Xiu felt that these types of drills didn't suit him. Steamed Bun Invasion liked the game because the game brought him happiness. However, when this type of happiness stops existing, Ye Xiu wouldn't know what type of attitude Steamed Bun Invasion would take. The reason pro players become pro players, besides having talent, working hard, etc., was because they loved the game. For example, for Ye Xiu, he had played the game for 10 years, but his love for the game hadn't died down. It wasn't just him. Every pro player that struggled to be a part of the alliance all did so because they loved the game. As for normal players, some would play for 2 or 3 months and then switch to a different game. These types of players weren't suitable to become pro players. Even if their mechanics were good enough, if they didn't have the passion, their performance would be vastly different from those that did, and they wouldn't be able to become anything great. Steamed Bun Invasion found the game fun, which was why he was interested. New, in-game content would naturally interest him. However, how long would he stay interested? Ye Xiu felt that he didn't understand Steamed Bun Invasion well enough. Normally, all he heard was the guy spouting random nonsense. He should have at least understood his previous gaming experiences. Ye Xiu had no idea where the guy got his mechanics from. Regardless, he still wasn't sure whether or not he should give specialized drills for Steamed Bun Invasion. He was afraid that it might cause him to lose interest towards the game and create conflicting feelings. Perhaps it was better to make him understand his own problems on his own right now, and then for him to happily look for help later. The other set of materials was for Tang Ru. The reason this sis wanted to improve her mechanics so she could beat him. Ye Xiu originally didn't believe that such a ridiculous reason would hold for much longer. However, from the looks of it, this sis's stubbornness far exceeded that of normal people. Before she beat him, it really didn't seem like she'd give up. The good thing was that as she improved and as she continued to understand glory, Tang Ru gained a greater understanding of just how far apart they were and would feel that the game wasn't as easy as she had said before. This sis's interest in glory was slowly forming. She would eventually be able to accept this type of practice. Ye Xiu thought this way and checked the materials again. He decided that he would give it to Tang Ru tomorrow. As for Steamed Bun Invasion, he would put it off for now. After tidying everything up, he closed the folder. There was still half an hour left until 7. Ye Xiu didn't have anything else to do, so he logged into the game. The game was the quietest at this time. No one was really talking on the world chat. The previous dispute between Tyrannical Ambition and the other players had died down a while ago, so many had already seen their daily dose of drama for the day. Those players who had argued with Tyrannical Ambition might not have any enmity towards Tyrannical Ambition. They just did it for the sake of roasting them. For example, the players that had written verses were only doing it in order to add fuel to the fire. For an experienced player like Jiang Yu, he should have understood this very well. Unfortunately, his mood had been very bad, which was why he suddenly went off like that and almost became a new meme. The world had finally quieted down. Ye Xiu conveniently checked the Line Canyon record. In first place was still Misty Castle and second place was still Tyrannical Ambition. Nothing had changed. He checked his friends' list and saw that the guild leaders were still on. Though among these, some of them were happy while others were worried. Those that hadn't set a record yet were a bit worried. As for the guild who was the most worried, that would have to be Tyrannical Ambition. Ye Xiu obviously wouldn't add fuel to the fire. He didn't have any sort of enmity with the guilds. It was just that his interests conflicted with theirs, and had lost the game because Lord Grimm was simply better than they were. Ye Xiu was using the last of his shift to check in on the situation. He was just sitting there idly with nothing to do when suddenly he received a message from Tyrannical Ambition's Cold Knight. God, Cold Knight sent him an icon of cupped fists. He already knew of Lord Grimm's identity, but as a fan of tyranny, there was no way he would truly worship their enemy, Team Excellent Era's former ace player. Yes, Ye Xiu replied. I want to know if you helped Misty Castle with their record. Cold Knight went straight to the point. Sure. I sold them a guide which should have been of some help to them. The King's Avatar Volume 4 Pursuit Chapter 262 Dungeon Tollbooth. Cold Knight asked directly, so Ye Xiu replied the same way. So it really was you. It was me. It seems like you're the only one who's capable of making such a record, Cold Knight said. Don't worry, I won't be setting records personally anymore. I'll only sell guides, Ye Xiu said. You don't even need to move to kill people. That sounds evil enough. Don't say it like that. Everyone needs to eat. If you won't let me set records, then I'll sell guides. You won't even let me sell guides. How do you want me to live? Cold Knight didn't know what to say. Since they weren't able to beat Lord Grimm, they allied together to kill him. In truth, there wasn't anything honorable about this. Even though he spoke this way, he didn't have a bad impression of Lord Grimm. However, if their guild were to develop, they would need the dungeon records. Methods such as pursuing and killing were methods that took place out in the open. However, there were even darker methods out there which Cold Knight had seen before. The game's virtual reality brought out the darkness within people. Oh, it's nothing. I just didn't want to believe that we'd lose so badly, so I wanted to confirm things with you. I understand now, Cold Knight replied. If you want to win, it's not like there's no chance. What methods are there? Cold Knight replied extremely quickly. Buy my guide, Ye Xiu replied. Sweat. Cold Knight had already realized that the buying and selling of guides might even be more terrifying than having Lord Grimm personally subbing in or holding the records hostage. This was because the buying and selling of guides wasn't only limited to in the game. This time, the guilds had no way of stopping it. In Tyrannical Ambition's current situation, directly taking back the record was the most effective way of coming back and would even give them a thrill that would definitely attract attention. As a result, Cold Knight was very interested in these guides. What type of guide is it? Cold Knight asked. The guide that Misty Castle used to beat your record. The same, of course. Then how can you guarantee that we'll beat their record? I shouldn't be able to guarantee anything, right? I only said that it was a chance. Ye Xiu said. So you're saying that since we'll be using the same guide, everything else depends on how we perform? Exactly. Cold Knight immediately pictured a scene. From here on out, every guild that wanted to fight for the dungeon records would first have to buy a guide from Lord Grimm. If not, then any guilds that didn't buy it would have no chance. This guy, he's no longer a kidnapper. He's transformed into a toll booth. From now on, his guides are the tickets needed to set records. Can I take a look at the guide first? Cold Knight asked. No, why not? Because our relationship isn't too good. I'm afraid that you won't give me any materials after looking at it, Ye Xiu said plainly. Then what happens if we were to give you the materials and you didn't give us the guide? Cold Knight asked in return. Then you'd have lost big time, Ye Xiu replied. You. Cold Knight was speechless. He clearly needed the guide. If he wanted to buy the guide, then he would need to give materials to Lord Grimm. There was no other option besides that. Cold Knight felt very gloomy. He didn't like this sort of thing, but there was no way he could depend on his strength. I'm going to log off at 7. You have 15 minutes to consider it, Ye Xiu messaged. Of course, if you're patient, then you can wait until I log in the afternoon or even until next year. You can buy my guides at any time as long as you pay enough materials. What materials? Cold Knight asked for the price. Ye Xiu sent him the list. These are all Fire Forest materials. Cold Knight skimmed over them and said, We've only just started dungeoning in Fire Forest, so we don't have these materials gathered up yet. Cold Knight didn't object to the asking price. Ye Xiu had estimated it. It was similar to the deal between him and Misty Castle. He had changed the materials, but their value was still about the same. Cold Knight knew that the price was lower than it would cost for Lord Grimm to personally sub in, but in reality, since they had only just started running Fire Forest, they truly didn't have the materials. Oh, but you should at least still have some of them, right? Maybe you can tell me what's in your guild's inventory and let me choose from it, Ye Xiu said. 1 sec, Cold Knight replied. He wasn't sure. After pondering it over for a few minutes, Cold Knight felt that he should discuss it with his boss. However, he didn't know if Jiang Yu had calmed down yet. If he suddenly told him that Lord Grimm was still the holder of the 10th server records, and that his situation was even more stable now, he was truly afraid that Jiang Yu would actually cough blood and have to be rescued by an ambulance. Wait just a bit longer. Cold Knight hastily messaged Lord Grimm and then hurriedly went to contact Jiang Yu. Simply speaking, he was anxious for Jiang Yu's reply. So this guy actually had all this planned from the start. Was that reason why he decided to drag along 4 random cheerleaders and lose? Cold Knight was startled. Now that Jiang Yu had said it, it did appear to be true. What do you say? Cold Knight felt that Jiang Yu had calmed down. Jiang Yu went silent for a full minute before finally saying, "Give him the materials." Okay, Cold Knight decided. Their current plight was truly difficult. If they continued to fight with Lord Grimm wouldn't care and they'd be the one losing out. After receiving Jiang Yu's reply, Cold Knight contacted Lord Grimm and said, "I agree. What materials do you guys have?" Ye Xiu asked. Cold Knight checked the inventory and asked the guild for a materials list. After a while, he suddenly came up with a plan to hide a few of the materials that Lord Grimm wanted. This trick was kind of pointless. With Lord Grimm's ability, it was just a matter of time before he got his hands on the materials that he wanted. But Cold Knight wasn't happy right now, so if you want something, we don't have it. We'll give you something you don't need. Ye Xiu looked at Cold Knight's list and didn't say anything. He picked a few materials and then replied back. Cold Knight looked and saw that there wasn't any problem. The materials were traded and Ye Xiu sent them the guide. Cold Knight opened up the document as if he was looking at a treasure. Just as he was about to say something else to Lord Grimm, he found that Lord Grimm had gone offline. Cold Knight suddenly panicked. What if they had been tricked? What if the guide was a fake? He hastily checked the guide and looked at the page count. Why was it so long? He continued to read and discovered that it was different from normal guides. This guide was extremely detailed. FCK, is he selling it based on the word count? Cold Knight disdained. But after looking at the highlighted portions and then reading them carefully, he immediately realized their significance. So it's like this. After reading a section, Cold Knight suddenly understood. Did you get the guide? On the other side, Jiang Yu was urging him. The King's Avatar Volume 4 Pursuit Chapter 263 Christmas Event. Cold Knight sent Jiang Yu's group the document. They all opened it and began studying it. After reading it through, they discovered that in order to break the record, they still needed to consult with Lord Grimm. If they had known this earlier, then they wouldn't have done so many tricks. There were no words to describe what they were feeling right now. The only thing that made them feel a bit better was that they knew who Lord Grimm really was. Ye Xiu. It was an identity that wouldn't garner any love and tyrannical ambition. At least against such a strong opponent, losing wasn't shameful. They were all comforted by this thought to some degree. They tacitly agreed not to mention Ye Xiu nor Lord Grimm and focus only on the guide's content. They were all experts, so they quickly understood the guide's value. The highlighted portions were the guide's most important points. The guide had originally required the use of 5 fixed classes, but by learning the most important parts of the guide, the classes didn't need to be fixed. Jiang Yu's group discussed this issue about how they could integrate the strategy into their class setup. Meanwhile, Ye Xiu had already logged off. Ye Xiu was now off from work, so he went out to eat breakfast. While coming back, he saw Chen Guo standing outside of the entrance, ordering a few employees around. "Oh, are we going to celebrate Christmas?" When Ye Xiu walked over, he saw that a small pine tree was standing erect at the internet cafe's entrance. Chen Guo was currently putting on bright lights and presents. "Oh, you actually know the date. You didn't make a mistake, did you?" Chen Guo said. For people like Ye Xiu who had their days and nights flipped upside down in her eyes, it was very easy for them to lose track of time. "I accidentally noticed it." Ye Xiu circled around the small pine tree. "Not bad. Ye Xiu praised. Of course. Is there actually stuff in here? Ye Xiu pointed to the small presents hanging on the tree. Of course. What's inside? Raffle prizes, coupons, etc. Chen Guo said. Oh, Ye Xiu understood. Clearly, Chen Guo was like a lot of business owners and used this holiday as a marketing scheme. I say, boss, when you set up events, you should pay more attention to it. You should buy a Christmas tree. What's up with this tree? Did you make it yourself with wires? Ye Xiu circled around the Christmas tree again. Ye Xiu could tell that this Christmas tree wasn't real and had been made entirely by hand. A handmade one isn't good enough. Chen Guo walked over and said, It's not that it's not good. It's just that it can't compare to an actual tree. It also looks kind of old. Was it from last year? Ye Xiu asked. Chen Guo shook her head. I made it with my dad 10 years ago. Ye Xiu was startled. He had worked in the internet cafe for almost a month. Even though he hadn't heard Chen Guo say it personally, he had heard quite a few stories about her from other employees. He had heard that Chen Guo had taken over the cafe by herself after her parents had passed away. This rough-looking, handmade Christmas tree wasn't just used by Chen Guo for advertisement, but it was also a reminder of her memories with her parents. This Christmas tree definitely had a lot of history behind it. Your dad's craftsmanship is pretty good. The tree looks really good, Ye Xiu said. Thanks. Chen Guo faintly smiled and didn't argue with Ye Xiu's obvious change in attitude. Do you need me to help you with anything? Ye Xiu asked. No need. Go ahead and sleep. Okay, Ye Xiu returned to his room to rest. Chen Guo stood next to the Christmas tree entranced. 10 years. This Christmas tree had accompanied her for 10 Christmases. Her father was still there on the first Christmas. The tree had been made by him as a Christmas present to her, but for the other 9 years only she and the tree had remained. Boss, can I hang this here? Chen Guo had been distracted when someone suddenly interrupted her thoughts. An employee was asking her if it was okay to hang a decoration there. A little higher. Chen Guo came back to the present and continued to direct. Ye Xiu went to bed, but he didn't sleep long and got up before noon. When he left his room and went downstairs, he saw that the internet cafe had a complete Christmas makeover. The handmade Christmas tree was loaded down with presents and ornaments and looked as if it was about to bend over. Apart from this, all sorts of bright lights and Christmas posters were put up. The most eye-catching headline was the announcement for Happy Internet Cafe's Christmas raffle. Not bad, not bad. I can feel the Christmas spirit. Ye Xiu looked around and praised Chen Guo. Yeah, Chen Guo replied. She didn't even lift up her head. The Christmas events are going to start soon. Shouldn't you hurry up? Chen Guo said. She and Tang Ru were at the computers playing Glory. The events she was talking about were directed towards the game, not the internet cafe. The game obviously wouldn't miss an opportunity like Christmas to promote sales. Every year, Glory would come up with new events for all sorts of holidays. For every new server that was opened, the very first holiday event would be Christmas. And these events were always great opportunities for leveling and equipment. For old servers, there wasn't much point in leveling. But for the new server, leveling was much more important than equipment. During these events, every minute and every second was precious. Aren't I here now? Ye Xiu smiled. He obviously wouldn't miss this opportunity. This was also why he got up early today. Sit here. There aren't any other empty stations. Chen Guo pointed to a computer next to them. Oh, Ye Xiu looked around again and noticed that business was going exceptionally well. He didn't know if it was because of the game's events or because of the internet cafe's holiday promotions. The computer Chen Guo pointed to was undoubtedly left open for Ye Xiu, even though she didn't directly say it. Without any other choice, Ye Xiu sat down and logged into the game. Wow, there are so many people, Ye Xiu noticed as soon as he got on. Yeah, Tang Ru said too. Compared to the old servers, there would only be more players in the new servers. In the old servers, players were scattered all around the entire world, while in new servers, players were limited to level 30 and below maps. As a result, the player population wasn't spread out evenly, and they were mostly crowded together. Even though technology had improved and the number of players wouldn't cause lag, having a lot of players still caused delays because this year's event had a competitive element to it. Hunt down the Christmas thieves. That was this year's Christmas event. The plot was extremely simple. Thieves had stolen gifts from Santa, so it was up to the players to get them back. Depending on the gift the player returned, Santa would reward the player with a Christmas present. Each Christmas present would give a certain amount of experience as well as an unknown reward. The quest could be done repeatedly, and a special ranking was created for the event, Christmas hunting leaderboards. Clearly, it was a ranking based on the number of Christmas thieves hunted. When the event ended, Santa would give a different final present depending on your ranking. That was the main quest, but there were also a few details. For example, when stealing back the gifts from the Christmas thieves, the gift might be a piece of equipment, a potion, or some other random item. Players could choose to keep these items instead of returning them to Santa. If the gift wasn't returned, then you wouldn't receive rewards for it. But it was possible that players could become stronger through these items, and as a result, do the event quests more efficiently. All of these items that were gifts would expire after the event ended, but during the event, they could be extremely useful for competitions between players. Apart from this, because player levels were different, there were several Christmas thief leaderboards that depended upon a range of player levels. The range was 5 levels. Players would only compete on their respective leaderboard. The rewards gained also depended on the player's level range. If you leveled up into a different level range, then your previous achievements would carry over into that new level's range on the leaderboard. The King's Avatar Volume 4 Pursuit Chapter 264 Luck is very important. Not long after Ye Xiu logged into the game, the clock hit 12 and the events began. Players had naturally studied the event's rules beforehand. Players didn't need to accept any quests. They just needed to look for the Christmas thieves scattered around the map. However, Christmas thieves had levels like normal monsters. The higher the level, the more points it would give. Besides this, there were also elite Christmas thieves. They would score more points than normal thieves and would also give better quality presents. Ha ha, my luck is good. I found one. Ye Xiu heard Chen Guo laugh. He turned his head and saw Chen Guo's chasing haze firing towards a Christmas thief. The thief immediately turned its head and pounced towards chasing haze. Meanwhile, nearby players also noticed this Christmas thief, but no matter how hard they attacked, the thief's only target was chasing haze. This was one of the special attributes of Christmas thieves. The first aggroed target was locked in. In order to prevent players from fighting amongst each other, whoever attacked the Christmas thief first had priority. Aggroed Christmas thieves would still be hurt by other players' attacks, but no matter how much damage was dealt, it would only help the player who aggroed it first. Seeing that chasing haze had already aggroed the Christmas thief, they stopped attacking and began searching again. The Christmas thief was nimble. It clearly wouldn't be so easy to kill. Christmas thieves had different classes just like players did. They were called thieves, but it didn't mean their class was that of a thief. The monster that Chen Guo aggroed closed in on her and slashed at her. It was a swordsman class, Berserker. Chen Guo's chasing haze used an aerial fire, dodging and attacking the Christmas thief. Not bad, Ye Xiu praised. Using aerial fire to widen the distance while attacking the target was a basic launcher maneuver. He could see that Chen Guo was quite proficient in this area. Her movements had been very clean. Chen Guo was absorbed in the killing. She was focused on her battle with the Christmas thief and hadn't noticed Ye Xiu praising her. Ye Xiu watched for a bit and then went back to his own game. His Lord Grimm had logged off in the wild. At this moment, players were running around everywhere around him. As soon as a Christmas thief spawned, who knew how many attacks flew at it, Ye Xiu stretched his neck and looked towards Tang Ru. Tang Ru's situation was similar to his. Players were everywhere. Finding a thief to kill was quite difficult. In this event, luck was an extremely important factor. As Ye Xiu maneuvered his Lord Grim, he opened a message and saw that it was from Su Mucheng's cleansing mist. "You're on time," Su Mucheng said. "Why are you on too?" Ye Xiu was surprised. "There's an event, of course I'm going to participate." Su Mucheng explained as if it were obvious. "It seems like you're not busy. Have you captured any thieves yet?" Ye Xiu helplessly asked. "Not yet. There's too many people." "I'm going to go to Fire Forest to take a look," Su Mucheng replied. Due to the rules, there would be fewer players in higher-leveled maps. After all, higher-leveled players could go to lower-leveled maps, but for lower-leveled players, it could be dangerous for them to go to higher-leveled maps. "I think Fire Forest is probably the same," Su Mucheng said. "I think so too." Other level 30 players might not be as skilled as Ye Xiu's group, but they could still wander around Fire Forest. It wasn't that they were unable to kill the monsters in Fire Forest. It was just that it wasn't as efficient for leveling purposes. "Maybe we should try aiming higher. What do you think about Sin City?" Su Mucheng said. Sin City was a level 3739 area. The entire leveling area was a city. The layout of the map wasn't too different from a main city, but the NPCs there weren't friendly, and their only form of communication towards players was to attack them. "There might be people there too, but there shouldn't be as many," Ye Xiu said. Players who were confident about surviving in Sin City were all probably heading over there. "Then let's go take a look." "Okay." Ye Xiu didn't forget to call for Tang Ru. He checked his friend's list and Steamed Bun Invasion was unexpectedly offline. As for the others, Seven Fields and Sleeping Moon were online. But for them, going to such a high-leveled area was probably too dangerous, so Ye Xiu didn't call for them. On their way there, Ye Xiu picked up 2 Christmas thieves. Christmas thieves had a certain strength to them. Their classes indicated that they had those classes' skills. At the very least, they were much more difficult than normal monsters of the same level. Ye Xiu was able to kill 2 Christmas thieves, but he had already seen 5 players die from the Christmas thieves. Currently, he didn't recognize most of the names on the leaderboards. It seemed like the experts weren't having very good luck. No matter how skilled they were, if they didn't see any Christmas thieves, then what was the point? Though he did recognize one of the names. Thousand Creations. The guy had unexpectedly placed on the level 3135 leaderboards. He clearly hadn't gotten the achievement through luck, but rather by kill stealing the monsters. Due to Christmas thieves locking onto their first target, most kill steals were avoided, but it couldn't entirely be avoided. Under this condition, it made kill stealing a lot more difficult. There might not be a way to kill steal the monster by attacking it, but you could kill off the player it was aggroed onto. That would cause the Christmas thief to turn neutral, which you could then attack in order to take it down. But doing things like this would only make you into a street rat. Ye Xiu didn't doubt that if Thousand Creations continued to stay on the leaderboards through this method, then today the world chat's main topic would be towards attacking this shameless kill stealer. Speaking of this guy should have already stolen quite a few. Were there no angry shouts at him? Ye Xiu looked at the world chat and saw that it was filled with complaints about the event being too difficult to kill Christmas thieves. Seeing the world chat, Ye Xiu couldn't help but think of Tyrannical Ambition's plight yesterday night. Even though he didn't care who held the dungeon record, Ye Xiu still checked it. The leaderboards hadn't changed. After Misty Castle had bought the guide, they had set the record after 1 or 2 hours. Ye Xiu didn't think that Tyrannical Ambition would lose to them, but there was no trace of them on the leaderboards. It was possible that Tyrannical Ambition didn't have the suitable accounts, so they were waiting for tomorrow to set it. Tusk, they're probably hurting inside, while waiting for the day to go by. Ye Xiu didn't care and didn't need to side with any guild, and in front of him, Sin City finally appeared. The King's Avatar Volume 4 Pursuit Chapter 265 Sin City. Sin City. After entering the leveling area, the sky's color changed. The sky was covered in dense, black clouds and thin rain drizzled down. The entire city had a sinister and dark hue around it. Enveloped in both rain and fog, players had limited visibility. The rain's dripping sound and the occasional thunder challenged the players' hearing. As soon as Lord Grimm entered the city streets, thunder roared and lightning flashed down from the sky, illuminating the entire street in a deathly pale light. In that instant, Ye Xiu suddenly moved his hands. His mouse shifted and Lord Grimm stabbed towards his left with his thousand-chance umbrella. The umbrella flipped inside out. Pooh! The dragon tooth connected with the target. The lightning revealed his pale and mean face, dripping with rain. His hands held a cold dagger which stabbed towards Lord Grimm, but he was hit first by Lord Grimm's attack. This was a Sin City resident, one of the monsters in this leveling area. Glory's drawings were extremely detailed. NPC monsters were randomly generated through character models. Their models were different from one another, which made them appear realistic and vivid. Sin City's unique environment and weather made it troublesome for players. The residents here were also extremely hostile. Their faces looked like fiends and their sneak attacks were sudden. If Ye Xiu were a normal player, he would have most likely been hurt by the sneak attack. Fortunately, Ye Xiu was Ye Xiu. His dragon tooth struck, followed by a sky strike. Ye Xiu was a pro player. He had to be familiar with every type of map. Many of the maps used in Glory's competitive matches were based on maps made in-game. After playing for so many years, how could he not be familiar with this type of environment? Sin City. When new players first arrive here, the reduced visibility and noisy background might make them feel repressed, and the residents' sudden attacks were likely to scare them. But for Ye Xiu, this was all too ordinary. After using a sky strike, Lord Grimm switched around with different forms and used different skills. But the high-level suppression greatly weakened Lord Grimm's killing potential. Even though the fight was without any suspense, it still took him quite a while to kill off the resident. Ye Xiu didn't want to waste his time on this resident. After killing it, he began paying attention to the surroundings. Residents were moving around in the 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and 1 o'clock direction. These residents' aggro range had obviously been researched by players long ago. For Ye Xiu, he was good enough that he could estimate the distance with his eyes. These 3 residents blocked the street he was on. No matter which way he went, he would inevitably enter their aggro range. Ye Xiu saw this, but his Lord Grimm continued forward. Charge forward. After seeing the resident at the 9 o'clock direction step twice, Ye Xiu used the opportunity to make Lord Grimm rush forward. Leap back. The resident in the 11 o'clock position suddenly stopped and turned back. Ye Xiu hastily had Lord Grimm leap backwards twice, just beyond the edge of the resident's aggro range. To the right, 30 degrees. After confirming the resident's positions, Ye Xiu made his decision and rushed forward diagonally. As he moved, his camera constantly moved, observing the 3 residents' movements. He would immediately make any adjustments based on their movements. Finally, after twisting and turning, Lord Grimm ran past them without being noticed. The process had been somewhat complicated, but it saved him a lot of time. "Are all of you here?" After getting past the blockade, Ye Xiu opened his friends' list and asked Suma Cheng and Tang Ru. "Here," the 2 replied in succession. The 3 didn't form a party after meeting up. Even though the event rules allowed for the formation of parties, the Christmas thieves would be mutually shared, which meant that each person would receive a lot less points for each one. From Ye Xiu's experience, parties were there to make the fights easier. If the individual was good enough, then going solo was more efficient than forming a party. Ye Xiu, Sima Cheng, and Tang Ru were without a doubt good enough to solo these monsters, so there was no need to party up. After encouraging them, Ye Xiu told Tang Ru the places she had to be careful around in Sin City, so that she didn't make a blunder due to her lack of experience. You have to listen carefully. Even though there's a lot of background noise, the monster's attacks won't be completely covered up. You will have to get used to screening out the necessary sounds from all of the noise. In Glory, lots of dangers behind the player could be found through experience and screening. It was an important game skill that had to be grasped. Got it, Tang Ru replied. Chen Guo glanced at Tang Ru's screen and immediately gasped in surprise. You're going to Sin City at that level. While looking towards Ye Xiu's screen, she said, You too. Not waiting for Ye Xiu's answer, Chen Guo began to bubble with excitement. Her hand pointed towards Ye Xiu's screen. A thief. I see it. Ye Xiu had no choice but to talk with her. Hurry up and attack it. I don't want to aggro the other monsters, Ye Xiu said. He had seen the Christmas thief long ago, but the guy was standing next to two Sin City residents. If he attacked now, the two residents would be aggroed. Ye Xiu wanted to wait for an appropriate time. Chen Guo understood what Ye Xiu meant. As a result, she ignored her own character and helped Ye Xiu watch the thief. That Christmas thief crouched into a corner and stopped moving. The two Sin City residents incessantly paced back and forth. Oh, hurry up and attack, Chen Guo suddenly hit Ye Xiu. The right one is still off by one position, Ye Xiu said. Really, Chen Guo muttered, if you're going to keep wasting your time like this, then you might as well just kill them all. No, you're good enough to do that, right? Don't rush me. Ye Xiu didn't move and looked as if this was his only option. Let's see how long you're going to wait, Chen Guo said when the two residents moved one step sideways. Right at this moment, Lord Grimm lifted his weapon and fired. The bullet moved extremely quickly. All Chen Guo saw was the blood that blossomed out when the bullet hit the Christmas thief's head. The Christmas thief immediately leaped up and charged forward. During this moment, the two residents turned around, but the attack had already ended, and only the Christmas thief headed towards Lord Grimm, which wasn't something that they really cared about. Ye Xiu had actually grasped that short window of opportunity. He had probably calculated the distance between them as well as the bullet's speed and the timing. Was that something she could do as well? Chen Guo realized long ago that Ye Xiu wasn't any ordinary expert, but after witnessing this scene, Chen Guo weighed herself against him and suffered a blow to herself. As for how Ye Xiu was going to kill the Christmas thief, Chen Guo had no interest in watching. That was because Chen Guo wouldn't be able to understand anything while directly watching Ye Xiu's screen. The King's Avatar Volume 4 Pursuit Chapter 266, Escaping Outside of the Aggro Range. Chen Guo stopped looking over at Ye Xiu's screen. She then turned her head and glanced at Tang Ru's screen. But the scene that she saw made her even more dumbstruck. These two people's circumstances were polar opposites. On Ye Xiu's side, he carefully planned and didn't arouse even a single Sin City resident. But on Tang Ru's side, now that was a commotion. Her soft mist ran like mad the entire way. Her character glanced around every few seconds, and Chen Guo already saw that there were at least 10 residents chasing after her already. Tang Ru's movements were truly extraordinary. In addition, she looked as if she would gather more. As she sprinted down the road, not a single resident that she passed by didn't notice her, and added itself to the growing number of troops. Tang Ru didn't want to provoke them either. It was just that their aggro range was just too large and they were just too aggressive. If she were here to level up, then that wouldn't be a bad thing and would actually be convenient for that purpose. But in her situation, avoiding these monsters' aggro required experience and awareness. It didn't matter how good her mechanics were. Tang Ru clearly wasn't at Ye Xiu's level. She had only recently entered Sin City and she had already gathered up so many residents. In the beginning, Tang Ru had killed them off. but after killing a few, she saw that she wasn't getting much experience. It was a complete waste of time. As a result, she didn't want to keep wasting her time. But in front of these Sin City residents, they weren't going to just not fight you if you didn't want to fight. It wasn't that convenient. Chen Guo watched for a bit and felt that Tang Ru was in a lot of danger. She hated how she wasn't able to help her, so she hastily went to grab Ye Xiu. Hey, don't pull, don't pull. Ye Xiu was currently attacking a Christmas thief. He was unable to withstand the drag and made a slip-up. Lord Grimm was hit by the thief's blade, which also disrupted Lord Grimm's combo. This Christmas thief was an actual thief class. After doing that, the thief rolled backwards and immediately began to wander off. Oh no! Chen Guo looked and also knew that the situation was bad. This was a commonly used tactic by thieves. They would wander off and place traps everywhere, restricting your movements. It seemed like the AI for these Christmas thieves were different than in the past. They moved as if they were real, like actual players. When a player accidentally set off an explosion, a spike, or a poison gas bomb, it was always a mood destroyer. A lot of players didn't lose to thieves in mechanics, but in their psychology. When affected players continued to fight in an imbalanced state of mind, their movements turned panicked and they would make more mistakes, causing them to lose. For people like Chen Guo, who were easily instigated, this sort of strategy was something that they feared intensely. Who knew how many times they had lost to thieves because of this? Seeing this situation, she accidentally put herself into the situation and panicked. She apologized for messing up Ye Xiu, but it was a groundless fear. The Christmas thief put down the first trap and then sidestepped, ready to put down a second. But before he could do so, 3 anti-tank missiles fired at him. The Christmas thief had nowhere to run. The thief was hit directly and failed to set the trap. Lord Grimm rushed forward with his 1000-chance umbrella in its battle lance form. He swung up with a sky strike, launching the thief into the air. The battle instantly returned to the original scene. The Christmas thief was stuck in Lord Grimm's combo and was unable to get out. Ye Xiu continued to play while asking, "What is it?" Chen Guo had been so worried that she had almost forgotten about Tang Ru's situation. She turned around and saw that Tang Ru's situation looked even worse now, so she replied hastily, "It's about little Tang. She's being chased by a lot of monsters." Ye Xiu heard this and glanced over to Tang Ru's side. "I've told her how to escape the monster's line of sight before." Ye Xiu didn't have hopes that Tang Ru had the ability to not alarm any residents like he was doing now. As a result, he reminded her of how to quickly escape from the monster's aggro. Escaping from their line of sight was one way to get rid of their aggro. Simply speaking, when you ran, you would turn more and wind around walls more. The aggro would quickly drop and the monsters would lose their line of sight and stop chasing. In Sin City streets, running away in this way was very easy. She was doing it, but what? Whenever she escaped from old residents, she would always bump into new ones, aggroing them. Tang Ru was stuck in this type of loop. In addition, now that she had pulled so many of these residents, it was too late to turn back and fight them all. "What are her coordinates?" Ye Xiu asked Chen Guo. Tang Ru was very focused and didn't know that the two of them were talking about her. Chen Guo checked when she suddenly saw a figure in front of Tang Ru's character. A figure appeared on one of the rooftops. Tang Ru immediately focused on her. Chen Guo immediately recognized the equipment on the character, a launcher. It was the class she was most familiar with. It was a female launcher too, so her familiarity increased by 100%. The character's class was the same, and the equipment were ones that she recognized, but there was one thing that was very different. This female launcher chose to have long hair that fluttered in the fine rain. The cannon in her hands lit up and flashed, shooting out a laser. The female launcher gently leaped backwards, utilizing the laser rifle's recoil. Tang Ru's camera followed the laser, which directly hit the dozen or so residents behind her. These monsters were only chasing her because she had entered their aggro range. Compared to that, an attack drew much more aggro from them. Simply speaking, the launcher created an odd, and most of the residents switched their targets to the female launcher, except for the 3 or 4 that hadn't been hit by the laser. "Oh," Chen Guo heard Tang Ru suddenly say. The female launcher had probably said a few words to her. Soon afterwards, more artillery shells were fired and those remaining residents were aggroed onto the female launcher. The dozen residents stopped chasing soft mist and began chasing after the launcher, but the female launcher had already disappeared. She had clearly jumped down onto a different street. She was escaping from the monster's line of sight. The residents climbed up the walls quickly, though, which was something players couldn't do. The group of residents climbed over and onto the other street. Not longer after, the launcher jumped onto another rooftop and down onto a different street. After a few rounds of this, their aggro was wiped clean. The dozen residents stayed on the streets and were no longer interested in their escaped target. This type of method for getting rid of aggro was simple and effective. But unfortunately, Tang Ru was unable to use it. Mages didn't have high jumps and weren't able to jump onto the rooftops. Those that could had to use spakula moves. For example, the gunner had aerial fire. Witches could use their brooms to fly up. Assassins could double jump, etc. Battle mages could do it through equipment effects and skills, but currently they weren't able to yet. The launcher returned to the original street and walked towards soft mist. "Thanks," Chen Guo heard Tang Ru say. She also saw the launcher's name, Cleansing Mist. "You recognize her?" Seeing that Tang Ru was no longer in danger, Chen Guo went to ask her. "Yeah, she's Ye Xiu's friend. She dungeons with us a lot." "She seems really good." "She is," Tang Ru said. "Is she better than me?" Chen Guo laughed. Tang Ru wasn't sure how to answer. "What? You asked if she's better. She says, which means that she's better than you." Ye Xiu couldn't but explain to Chen Guo. The King's Avatar Volume 4 Pursuit Chapter 267 Christmas Hunting Leaderboards, HMPH. Chen Guo wasn't as competitive as Tang Ru. It was only because the female character was playing the same class as she was, as well as her heroic entrance, which caught her eye, that she had jokingly asked such a question. In the end, Ye Xiu seemed certain that that female launcher was better than she was, immediately making her depressed. She was completely capable of doing what that launcher had done, too. Why was that launcher better then? "I think I'll try again." Tang Ru was clearly talking in game. Sima Cheng had just happened to pass by when she noticed that Tang Ru was in trouble. The trouble was now solved, but if Tang Ru continued, she would most likely fall into the same situation again. As a result, Sima Cheng had suggested that the two party up. But Tang Ru wasn't so soft. The only reason why the situation had occurred was because she hadn't been prepared enough. She kept on aggroing them until she couldn't deal with them anymore. But now that she had a fresh start, Tang Ru felt like if she paid a bit more attention, then the situation shouldn't go as badly as before, which was why she had said to Sima Cheng that she wanted to try again by herself. "Okay, that's fine," Sima Cheng said and sent a smiley face. Thus the two split up and headed in opposite directions, one heading east and the other heading west. Tang Ru had soft mist run a few steps forward and stop. She stretched her neck towards Ye Xiu's screen to steal his techniques. Ye Xiu's progress was going smoothly. He quickly found another Christmas thief, and just like before, he aggroed it without disturbing any of the other residents. Ye Xiu saw Tang Ru out of the corner of his eyes. He attacked the thief while saying, "There's no point in looking. You won't be able to learn how to do what I'm doing in an instant." "Why not?" Tang Ru was pondering over the method Ye Xiu had just used to avoid the monsters when she heard Ye Xiu talk to her. "Expert, you explain to her," Ye Xiu said to Chen Guo. Chen Guo was speechless. Usually, when someone called her an expert, she'd become happy. But being called an expert by someone who was clearly better than she was made her feel as if she had been called a noob. Chen Guo glared at Ye Xiu, while still giving Tang Ru an explanation. She told her that Ye Xiu's methods didn't involve any special techniques, but it relied on experience and intuition, which could only be gained through time. This was something only experienced players possessed. Tang Ru heard this and could only nod her head. As a new player, she had no way of replicating that. Just how far apart were the monster and herself? Tang Ru looked 100 times but couldn't tell. Since she had no way of copying Ye Xiu, Tang Ru was forced to use her own clumsy method. If the monster seemed easy to avoid, then she'd simply go through without arousing the monster. If the monster didn't seem easy to avoid, she wouldn't risk it and would find somewhere else to go. She was basically just wandering around the city randomly. If there was nowhere to hide and no way of easily getting through, then her only choice would be to force her way through. Tang Ru relied on her own ability and struggled through Sin City. She found a few Christmas thieves on the way and killed them off conveniently. To her, fighting was a lot simpler than finding her way around the city. In the end, the saddest person was Chen Guo. She had luckily bumped into a Christmas thief at the beginning of the event, but ever since then, she hadn't encountered any others afterwards. Whenever she saw one, it was always taken away by someone else first. Chen Guo could only admire Tang Ru and Ye Xiu as they killed Christmas thieves from time to time. The new server truly was better. For there to actually be Christmas thieves that no one was scrambling for. As for the heavenly domain, which Chen Guo's chasing haze resided in, there were crowds of players everywhere she went. The players' enthusiasm was too scary. If the heavenly domain was like this, then that meant that the older servers were also like this. In addition, the heavenly domain had its own server leaderboard. Points gained from the old server and points gained from the heavenly domain wouldn't be combined. Chen Guo had already decided that she would stick with the heavenly domain server. She didn't have the ambition to get onto the leaderboards. She just wanted to kill a few thieves and then earn some of the rewards. But 1 hour after the event began, poor Chen Guo was only able to kill 3 Christmas thieves. However, the rewards from catching 3 Christmas thieves was better than the gains one normally made in an hour. When max-leveled players turned in the stolen gifts from the thieves they had killed to Santa, the experience they gained would automatically be turned into money, in addition to a whole bunch of other rewards. But the ones who were truly excited were those on the system announcements. In the global chat, there would be messages about some players earning a rare reward. In order to get on TV, the rewards had to be a purple or higher ranked equipment, an uncommon material, a hidden dungeon map, a boss summoning scroll, an equipment enhancement scroll, or even skill books. All of these rewards were things that everyone wanted. It didn't even matter what the probability of getting those were. Everyone rushed like ducks to try and grab one. Messages of joy, sobbing, bragging, and cursing appeared in the global chat. It didn't matter since no one would give up on the event. Seeing how a few players were grumbling in grief about how they hadn't been able to kill a single thief, Chen Guo's 3 thieves looked quite promising. At the very least, her hour hadn't been wasted. But for these types of events, the scariest part about them was comparing your results with others. Compared to those crying players, Chen Guo was very lucky. However, compared to the 2 people beside her, Chen Guo really wanted to punch them. On her left, Tang Ru had killed 9 Christmas thieves in an hour. On her right, Ye Xiu was even crazier. He had killed 14 Christmas thieves in an hour. Chen Guo wasn't even close to them. For her, every time she caught a Christmas thief, she would impatiently run to Santa and exchange it for a present. But them, their inventory had lots of stolen gifts in them, but it seemed as if they wouldn't go back until their inventories were full. Chen Guo was extremely sad. Fill up her inventory. That was only a dream for her. Ye Xiu and Tang Ru focused on searching for Christmas thieves and hadn't paid any attention to the person that was between them, who had only killed 3 in an hour. Aside from searching for Christmas thieves, they had also paid attention to the leaderboard. The Christmas hunting leaderboards. Ye Xiu's Lord Grimm was 261st place after an hour. As for Tang Ru's Soft Mist, she was quite far from Lord Grimm, at 784th place. The two were also able to see Su Macheng's Cleansing Mist, which was at 319th place, way ahead of Tang Ru and fairly close to Ye Xiu. But the biggest difference was that, while Lord Grimm and Cleansing Mist were still rising up in the leaderboard, Soft Mist was beginning to hover around the 800th mark. Clearly, at this ranking, she was killing off Christmas thieves at the same rate as those at the 800th mark. The competition was fierce, but Ye Xiu's and Su Macheng's skill levels truly were higher than everyone else's by a whole level. The leaderboards clearly showed their gap, but for Tang Ru, these rankings only fired up her spirit even up more. As soon as her name showed up on the leaderboards, she rushed up to the 800th mark. But after that, she was unable to move forward any further. This achievement hadn't come easy. She had been running around Sin City like crazy. In that hour, she had killed 9 Christmas thieves, but had also killed 18 Sin City residents. Those battles had consumed a lot of her time. The level 30-135 Christmas hunting leaderboard caught their attention, but they didn't pay too much attention to other leaderboards. For example, the hunting leaderboard for guilds. This leaderboard didn't distinguish between the different skill levels. It looked at the total number of points from all the players in the guild. Without a doubt, guilds with more members and higher-leveled members would have the advantage, but it also could be argued that this was a representation of a guild's strength. At this moment, the guild that placed first on the 10th server's Christmas Hunting Guild leaderboard wasn't Herb Garden, Blue Brook Guild, or Tyrannical Ambition. Excellent Dynasty. Excellent Dynasty was impressively placed first by a large margin, too. The number 2 was Herb Garden, who was followed closely behind by Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition. In reality, the rankings between these 3 guilds were a messy battle. The placings between them constantly shifted. For all of these big guilds who had failed in the competition for the dungeon records, this Christmas event was a huge chance for them to prove themselves. This competition this time seemed to be unrelated to Ye Xiu. Ye Xiu glanced at it for a second and then stopped paying attention to it. The King's Avatar Volume 4 Pursuit Chapter 268, Deviously Stealing Monsters. The players continued to work hastily at their task. As for the leaderboards, the majority of players looked at it with 1/3 envy, 1/3 jealousy, and 1/3 pain. The players on the leaderboards were definitely earning more presents and rewards than the other players. In addition, whether it was due to skill or luck, these players would only continue to grow stronger with more presents, making others feel truly helpless at their situation. The players who were on the leaderboards followed their placing carefully in order to maintain it or rise further. Only by doing this long-term would they gradually begin to guarantee their spots. Being able to hunt Christmas thieves in Sin City was undoubtedly a reflection of a player's skill. Tang Ru continued to work hard, and her ranking began to gradually rise as a result. Finally, when some of the luckier players who had found Christmas thieves consecutively began to run out of luck, they gradually started falling off as players who relied on their skill, such as Tang Ru, steadily pushed ahead. 774767751749. Every time Tang Ru killed a Christmas thief, the number of points she earned increased, and her name would go up a few rankings. And just like this, Tang Ru continued advancing step by step, improving her spirit with each step. Her left hand tapped her keyboard, while her right hand held her mouse and her two eyes stared intently at the screen, unwilling to shift away for even a single second. Leaderboards possess this type of mysterious attractive force. Another one. Tang Ru was getting more and more used to Sin City's atmosphere and was also getting better and better at finding targets while having a hazy field of vision. Out in the distance, amidst the rain and fog, a blurry figure could be seen. Tang Ru determined that it was a Christmas thief and immediately rushed towards it. At the same time, another figure flashed out from the other side of the street, sprinting towards the same Christmas thief. In the figure's hands was a bright lightsaber that stood out in the rain. Tang Ru saw the figure and immediately understood the person's intent. After being in Sin City for so long, she had seen many other players, but this was the first time she had set her eyes on the same target as another player. Tang Ru obviously wouldn't back down. She chose the shortest route to the Christmas thief and sprinted towards it. A Sin City resident that she had been planning to avoid was alerted. She didn't have the time to bother being careful. The Sin City resident naturally wouldn't be nice to Tang Ru. Soft Mist's figure dashed past his eyes as the resident pounced forward coldly with a knife in his hands. The opposing Blade Master also noticed the incoming battle mage. The majority of the players who were currently in Sin City were veterans in glory and were far more experienced than Tang Ru. Judging from the distance between the two to the Christmas thief, the Blade Master determined that he was one step faster than her. Just as he thought that he had won, he saw that the battle mage had alerted the monster, which made him feel even happier, reinforcing his confidence in snatching this Christmas thief. When the resident closed in, Tang Ru didn't hesitate. Her right hand swiped her mouse and Soft Mist sent a sky strike, launching the resident into the air. Soft Mist stepped sideways and then used a falling flower palm. The force from the palm scattered the rain, creating a ripple. It all looked very tyrannical. Not good. When the Blade Master saw the direction of the palm, he panicked. The battle mage had unexpectedly used the monster to profit from the disaster. She had originally been a bit slower, but now with the falling flower palm, the resident had accurately crashed into the Christmas thief. After the Christmas thief climbed up, the thief nimbly ran towards Soft Mist. The Blade Master quietly watched and could only curse out loud. Tang Ru heard the player curse, but ignored him. Soft Mist went forward and met with the Christmas thief and that resident. It was a 1v2, but Tang Ru wasn't scared. She had killed quite a few Christmas thieves and residents already. Attacking two of them at the same time wasn't too difficult for her, which was why she wasn't afraid to alert the resident and use it to her advantage. The Blade Master originally planned to get ready to leave. However, at this moment, the two players moved a bit closer to one another, allowing him to see the blurry id that had been hidden by the mist and rain. Soft Mist. Seeing this id, the Blade Master halted. He put his sword next to him as the Blade Master quietly watched Soft Mist fight. Level 31. The Blade Master looked up the id and confirmed Soft Mist's level. At this level, she would suffer from level suppression in Sin City. Yet it looked as if the 1v2 was going smoothly, confirming Soft Mist's strength. The Blade Master couldn't deny that she deserved to be a member of Lord Grimm's dungeon team. The Blade Master thought to himself for a bit, and then quietly left. Tang Ru had noticed the player watching her and was prepared for a fight. But after seeing the player leave, she relaxed. She guessed that the player was thinking about whether or not she was able to deal with both a Christmas thief and a monster at the same time. If she wasn't capable of doing so, then he would have picked up the scraps. But after seeing that the situation wasn't going to happen, he naturally left. This type of thinking wasn't anything noble, but it was at least better than directly killing the opposing player and forcefully stealing the monster. Tang Ru clearly wasn't having any trouble with the two monsters if she still had the ability to think about other things. After collecting her thoughts, she focused on the fighting. But to her surprise, the Blade Master returned not long after and was running like crazy, too. Behind him were 10 or so Sin City residents. With around 10 people running along the wet ground, the footsteps were able to be heard clearly. Tang Ru heard the noise, so turned her head to look and saw that the guy was running towards her with the mob of monsters. Tang Ru stopped smiling. This guy was in the same situation as she was before. Even though she sympathized with him, Tang Ru couldn't do anything to help. She was afraid of this, too. In the blink of an eye, the person reached her. Tang Ru looked closer and was suddenly startled. Wind following sword. Wasn't this id the same as that Blade Master she had just seen? He had only just run off, so why did he suddenly gather so many monsters? That wasn't normal, right? Even if Tang Ru was inexperienced, she could still tell that something wasn't right. Just as she brought up her guard, this time wind following sword wasn't as nice and a sword wind sliced towards her. A sword light flashed amidst the dusky rain and fog. The sword wind carried the rain, beautifully soaring towards soft mist. It looked good, but it didn't make her feel good. Tang Ru immediately had soft mist dodged to the side, but the thief and resident didn't care about her situation and continued to attack. Sword light flashed once again. Wind following sword used a sword draw and then followed up with a triple slash to close in. In that instant, 3 opponents were attacking her, but Tang Ru didn't panic. She dodged to the side and sent out a sky strike. Wind following sword was a bit slow. He wasn't able to dodge the attack in time and was launched into the air, not high up, but still knocked up. Tang Ru wasn't polite in the slightest and followed up quickly with a falling flower palm. Palm hit. Wind following sword was hit directly by the falling flower palm and was sent flying backwards. Tang Ru suddenly cried out, "Oh no! Ha 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 ha, girl, you really like using this trick." Wind following sword wasn't acting like the loser and was unexpectedly laughing. His body flew and crashed into the giant mob of Sin City residents. These residents had grouped together. His crash was even more thorough than Su Macheng's laser rifle. Every single resident was hit, and their aggro counted towards soft mist. Against a devious opponent, Tang Ru's lack of experience had finally cost her the King's Avatar Volume 4 Pursuit Chapter 269. It's not that simple. The 10 or so Sin City residents climbed up from the ground. Their gazes were all directed towards soft mist. They hissed and then swarmed forward. Wind following sword slowly got up at this moment. On top of his head was a word bubble with an evil, smiley face in it. Tang Ru felt extremely disdainful of this player. This time she was actually angry. She hadn't been this angry even when the big guilds had ambushed her. She didn't say anything and then suddenly pounced directly towards the 10 residents. However, her scarlet moon lance was pointed towards the peaceful wind following sword. Wind following sword was startled by Tang Ru's manner, but after seeing the 10 residents between them, he immediately calmed down. This sister. It's hard to even say if she'd be able to run away from these monsters, yet she actually advanced forward instead of retreating. It looked very silly. Wind following sword didn't move and watched soft mist clash with the residents. He wasn't planning on leaving. He wanted that Christmas thief behind soft mist. Of course, if he also killed off soft mist, then that'd be good too. Soft mist once again used a falling flower palm. Her palm hit the center of the mob and the energy rippled through, spreading out in a series of crashing explosions. It was as if a bomb had been set off inside the mob. The monsters were immediately split up and sent into a state of confusion. Wind following sword looked and saw that soft mist was better than he had originally thought. But even though the falling flower palm had been done well, if she wanted to directly charge forward, it wouldn't be that simple. Because of the level suppression, falling flower palm's blow-away effect would be greatly weakened. The palm really had been executed beautifully, but the effects didn't reach Tang Ru's expectations. The distance that the monsters were blown away wasn't far enough. Tang Ru was just about to have Soft Mist charge forward and attack Wind-Following Sword, but two of the residents that hadn't been blown away suddenly pounced towards her. Wind-Following Sword laughed coldly. In this type of situation, he didn't think that Soft Mist would dare to battle with these two residents. If she did, the other residents would surround her, and by that point, even if she were given wings, she'd have difficulty escaping. In the end, Soft Mist swung her Scarlet Moon Lance and actually attacked the two residents. Wind-Following Sword stared blankly and then sneered. "Idiot!" The two residents were launched into the sky by the Sky Strike. Closely following, Soft Mist extended her hands and stabbed forward at one of them with a dragon tooth, sending one of them towards Wind-Following Sword. Soft Mist stepped forward, stabbed forward again, picking up the other resident, and threw it in a half circle. That resident was thrown behind her, causing a shockwave, knocking the monsters that had just gotten up back to the ground. This time, Wind-Following Sword was truly shocked. Under the level suppression, Sky Strike's knock-up effect wouldn't be too high, but in that short amount of time, Soft Mist had actually completed a dragon tooth and a circle swing, with extreme accuracy as well. That hand speed made Wind-Following Sword reevaluate her. Wind-Following Sword dodged the resident, but then saw a fire chaser fly towards him and strike the resident. The fire chaser exploded, and Wind-Following Sword was caught in the explosion. Fire chasers did area of effect damage. She had even sent out a fire chaser at that moment. She had controlled it perfectly as well to catch both of them in the explosion. It definitely wasn't a coincidence. This girl, her mechanics were incredible. Wind-Following Sword was thinking on turning when Soft Mist closed in. Her Scarlet Moon Lance sliced towards him as if it were about to cut him into a meat patty. But Wind-Following Sword wouldn't be beaten as easily as those monsters. He sidestepped and countered with his own attack. He then jumped backwards twice, causing Soft Mist's next two stabs to hit nothing but air. Tang Ru was startled. For the competitive her, this type of situation excited her. Whether it was her hand speed or her microing, they would all be better than normal when she was in battle. Her double stab had been performed quite quickly, but the opponent had unexpectedly anticipated it and jumped backwards. Wind-Following Sword chuckled and returned with an upward slash. Tang Ru jumped back without thinking. Pow! The Christmas thief had caught up and whacked her. The thief's aggro was still on Soft Mist's body. The thief wasn't planning on running. At this moment, Sin City's residents had climbed up and pounced forward. But even in this situation, Tang Ru was even more intent on carrying out her program than those NPCs and continued to attack Wind-Following Sword. Her lance pricked up with a Sky Strike, which was once again easily dodged by Wind-Following Sword. She turned and her left hand struck. A tyrannical falling flower palm shot forward but unfortunately missed. Missed? Why can't I hit him? Tang Ru didn't feel like there were any problems with her playing, but the opponent seemed to always be able to predict her moves. Under this tense situation, Tang Ru was unable to calm down. The only thought in her head was to fight. Even if she was going to end up being surrounded by the monsters, she would drag that evil guy to hell with her. With her fighting spirit risen, she fiercely attacked. This time, she only used normal attacks. Tang Ru's hands moved even faster than before, sacrificing precision to do so. All she knew was that her attacks were headed in the general direction towards Wind-Following Sword. Even if she died, she was going to kill that guy. Stab, slash, slice. These basic attacks brought about an unexpected effect. Wind-Following Sword wasn't as calm as before. The 3 consecutive attacks had thrown him off guard. He failed to dodge the slice, which hit his waist, causing his character to stagger to the side 2 steps. He didn't seem to be having as easy of a time dodging as he had before. Tang Ru suddenly understood what was going on. Ye Xiu had taught her about this before. Pay attention to the skills that were used, and that wind-following sword was using this method. Before this, Tang Ru had used a falling flower palm, sky strike, dragon tooth, and circle swing in quick succession. After that, those 4 skills were on cooldown, and the chasers would be shot out only when hitting the target. Finally, since Soft Mist was a level 31 battle mage, her only skill left was a double stab. Wind-following sword had calculated this, which was why he was able to easily predict the double stab. Soft Mist then used her skills one after the other once the skills went off cooldown, which wind-following wind predicted and dodged easily. It was because her hand speed was quick that the opponent could predict her moves so easily. The instant that she finished all her skills, she would use them again as soon as they could be used. This wind-following sword wasn't so simple either. Tang Ru had obviously practiced this before under Ye Xiu's guidance, but even though the theory was simple, doing it in practice wasn't. Tang Ru was still learning to pay attention to her own skills, cooldowns, and was far from being able to pay attention to the opponent's skill usage and cooldowns. But this wind-following sword, even if it was only because Soft Mist only had a few skills and was predictable, was still able to do something that Tang Ru wasn't able to. But this time, Tang Ru's quick normal attacks finally made it so that he was unable to keep up. Normal attacks didn't have cooldowns, so wind-following sword had no way of predicting them, and since Tang Ru was faster than he had no way of dealing with them. He hadn't yet stabilized himself when a scarlet light flashed in front of him again. Soft Mist Sky Strike had struck again. This time, wind-following sword wasn't able to dodge and was launched into the air. Circle Swing. The lance stabbed through wind-following sword and then threw him towards the ground. The monsters that were now surrounding her were knocked to the ground by the following shockwave. However, Tang Ru wasn't able to completely protect herself from every direction. During that time, she had also been hit by the Monsters the King's Avatar Volume 4 Pursuit. Thank you for listening to the story on KevinAudio.com. Chapter 270. Battle Spirit. Tang Ru finally hit wind-following sword, but the price in doing so had been extremely high. During that time, the monsters were hitting her, dropping her health by a third. Unfortunately, due to the level suppression, the damage that she took was also greater. In comparison, the damage that she had inflicted onto wind-following sword was not even close to that high. It definitely wouldn't be good for her if they continued to exchange blows like this. Even though it was a fact that battle mages were a part of the mage class, they had a strength growth rate of 3.5, which was the same as blade masters. However, for their defense, they maintained the same value, a weak 2.5 vitality growth rate, just like the other mage classes. And for their equipment, battle mages were proficient with leather armor, while blade masters were proficient with light armor. Battle mages also had weaker defenses. Battle mages had the disadvantage in vitality and defense. How could battle mages trade blows with blade masters? Even more so, wind-following sword's level was higher than hers, and Soft Mist was the only opponent he had faced. On the other hand, Soft Mist also had the 10 residents, as well as the mighty Christmas Thief, as opponents. It was extremely difficult, but compared to beating Ye Xiu, Tang Ru felt that it was still doable. Soft Mist brandished her lance and guarded against the monsters. She fished out a health pot and downed it. In an endurance battle, you had to grasp the timing for when to drink potions. As soon as your health and mana began to fall, you had to start paying attention to them. The things Ye Xiu had taught her were now appearing clearly in her mind. Tang Ru knew how difficult this battle would be, so she focused her attention on the battle. Dragon Tooth. Her Scarlet Moon lance stabbed forward, brushing past the two residents, and headed directly towards Wind-Following Sword, who hastily dodged it. Soft Mist then followed up with a falling flower palm. The monsters ahead were blown away, blocking Wind-Following Sword's left and right escape routes. Wind-Following Sword immediately jumped into the air and allowed the flying monsters to pass through. Seeing that there was a huge opening in Soft Mist's defenses right now, Wind-Following Sword grabbed his sword, and just as he was about to use a falling light blade, he suddenly changed his mind and canceled it. The skill hadn't come out, but since he had already activated it, the skill went cooldown. It looked like a waste, but in a high-skill battle, faking an attack was common. Wind-Following Sword didn't have any intentions of faking an attack. When he landed on the ground, he laughed coldly. "Are you trying to trick me? Girl, you're still too naive." The falling light blade might have hit Soft Mist, but the shockwave would have also hit the surrounding monsters. At that moment, Wind-Following Sword had figured out Tang Ru's intent, to trick him into aggroing those monsters. "You go and play with them on your own," Wind-Following Sword laughed. He used a triple slash to retreat far away. Seeing that Wind-Following Sword hadn't been duped, Tang Ru's plan fell through. After seeing him run away, she became even more aware that the situation she was in wasn't looking good. That guy was too shrewd. Compared to how he played, she really was too simple. Perhaps the only way for her to win is to charge forward without looking back. Soft Mist's neutral chasers provided her with a movement speed buff, and the fire chasers buffed her strength. Her condition flourished as she rushed towards Wind-Following Sword. Wind-Following Sword had pretty much figured out her plan. He walked around and decided that he wouldn't tangle around with her. Soft Mist had the advantage in movement speed, but Wind-Following Sword was able to walk around freely, while she had to deal with the monsters. She was able to hit Wind-Following Sword sometimes, but she had no way of following up on it. If she ignored the pursuing monsters, she would definitely be the first to fall. They continued to run around like this, and Wind-Following Sword's health slowly whittled away. However, Wind-Following Sword didn't panic. He took out a health potion and downed it right in front of Soft Mist and looked at her as if he were the emperor. How to fight in a prolonged battle was a course that every expert needed to take. Wind-Following Sword clearly knew about this. At this moment, he had calmly drank a potion, and arrogantly too. He had naturally wanted Tang Ru to lose hope. Wind-Following Sword hadn't been paying attention to the time. When he checked, he suddenly jumped up in fright. He had been messing around with Soft Mist for 20 minutes already. Soft Mist had spent 20 minutes being chased by monsters who were 6 to 8 levels higher while chasing him. This girl was a bit too fierce. Wind-Following Sword arrogantly drank another potion. As his opponent chased after him, she also drank a potion. She didn't waver and hadn't admitted defeat yet. This type of person could be knocked down, beaten, and killed. However, it didn't look as if it were possible to make her give up. "You really do possess skill." Wind-Following Sword began speaking, "but this truly is too boring." Tang Ru ignored him and continued to have Soft Mist rush forward. Wind-Following Sword continued to dodge her attacks. "Watch my sword!" Wind-Following Sword suddenly shouted. Soft Mist immediately halted. "Ha ha ha ha, I was just playing with you." Wind-Following Sword laughed, as if he was looking for some fun in something that was very boring. After 20 minutes of playing like this, Tang Ru's condition finally seemed to be declining. Her continuous charging forward without looking back momentum was affected, and the monsters had caught up with her. It didn't look as if she possessed the ability to deal with Wind-Following Sword anymore. FCK. Wind-Following Sword was finally able to stand still and relax. "If you knew this was going to happen, why'd you have to dawdle around? Hurry up and die already. You're wasting my time." Wind-Following Sword shouted at the struggling Soft Mist. Blade Masters really liked spouting nonsense. Tang Ru, who had been silent the whole time, suddenly shouted. Her voice sounds quite nice. That was the first thought that appeared in Wind-Following Sword's mind. But he could also hear the coldness and murderous intent in her voice. To be toyed around like this, it'd be weird if she wasn't angry. Aren't you bored of talking so much? Accompanying this was a loud explosion. A lightning bolt crashed down from Sin City's skies. The monsters that were surrounding Soft Mist were suddenly blown away. A falling flower palm, along with a coincidental thunder boom, made the scene look extremely impressive. Wind-Following Sword suddenly felt weird. Under the level suppression, why was her falling flower palm able to have such an effect? He didn't have the time to think carefully because Soft Mist had already pounced forward towards him. You really are stubborn. Wind-Following Sword sounded a bit helpless, but his sword wasn't. A sword draw sliced through the air. The girl had fought against the monsters for quite a while, so him doing some damage wouldn't aggro the monsters. Soft Mist jumped into the air and dodged the sword slash. Dragon Tooth. Soft Mist immediately stabbed forward. Wind-Following Sword calmly jumped backwards. Pow! He was hit. What? Wind-Following Sword was astonished. How did that attack hit? Did her attack speed increase? He didn't have the time to think about this problem. Wind-Following Sword was suddenly in a stunned state. He couldn't help but notice that his health was dropping a bit too fast. It was just a dragon tooth. How did it do so much damage? Another scarlet light flashed. What? Is it actually faster? Wind-Following Sword thought as he was launched into the air. The following two stabs directly pierced through him. Double stab, he flew outwards, but the third stab grabbed him in midair and swung him around. That can't be right. Why is my health dropping so quickly? Wind-Following Sword began to panic. Dragon Tooth, Sky Strike, Double Stab, these three moves had dropped his health bar to half. As he was swung around in the air, Wind-Following Sword glanced at Soft Mist's body. A light, golden glow surrounded her body. He hadn't noticed before because of the rain. Wind-Following Sword was immediately stunned. He, who was experienced, obviously recognized this skill. It was the Battle Mage's level 50 awakening skill, Battle Spirit. How could this skill appear now? The King's Avatar Volume 4 Pursuit Chapter 271 7th Stage Battle Spirit. A level 50 awakening skill obviously couldn't appear on a level 31 character. However, the glow around Soft Mist, as well as her sudden increase in attack speed and strength, was without a doubt from Battle Spirit. Battle Spirit continuously buffed the Battle Mage as they fought. The buff applied was based on the number of consecutive combos done by the Battle Mage. At a 10-hit combo, the attack speed would increase by 0.5, the movement speed by 2%, and the strength stat by 30. At a 20-hit combo, the attack speed would increase by 1, the movement speed by 4%, and the strength stat by 50. At a 30-hit combo, the attack speed would increase by 1.5, the movement speed by 6%, and the strength stat by 70. And like this, there were a total of 7 stages. On the 7th stage, the buff would be even greater than the previous jumps. The 7th stage required the Battle Mage to combo 120 hits, but the attack speed would increase by 6, the movement speed by 24%, and the strength stat by 260. Compared to the 6th stage, it required twice as many combos, but also doubled the buff. How strong were these buffs? An attack speed of 6 was similar to the difference between the slowest greatsword and the Takai. A movement speed increase of 24% was 4% more than the buff from a max-level neutral chaser. As for a strength stat increase of 260, that was even more terrifying. The Ghostblade sword boundary would only increase the strength stat by 150 at max level. A Battle Mage at the 7th stage of Battle Spirit was extremely terrifying. Wind-Following Sword was an experienced player. Soft Mist was moving faster, attacking faster and also hitting harder. He was well aware that she was at the 7th stage of battle spirit. That golden glow around her was quite distinct. The 7th stage was indeed extremely strong, but in reality, it was practically impossible to achieve. If she had comboed wind following sword 120 times, then he would have died long before that. If that happened, she wouldn't even have the opportunity of getting to the 7th stage. The 7th stage could, in reality, only be achieved in a chaotic battle where there were many targets, allowing the battle mage to quickly rack up a high combo. Soft Mist had used these surrounding monsters to accumulate a 120-hit combo. After reaching the 7th stage, she turned to Wind Following Sword to attack him. As for where the battle spirit came from, Wind Following Sword knew the answer. Event. It was due to the Christmas event. The items from Christmas thieves could be used. After using the item couldn't be used to exchange for gifts with Santa. These items couldn't be traded and weren't worth any money. They would also expire after the event had ended. Smart players weren't likely to use these items, but Soft Mist had been forced to use one of the items that she had received from a Christmas thief. Skill Scroll. Skill scrolls allowed a skill to be added onto an equipment. The skill scroll would then add one level to the skill. The level of the skill could even go over the max level. In other words, if a skill was at max level 10, then after using a skill scroll, it added a level to that skill, making the skill go to level 11. However, there was a limit to the amount of times a skill scroll could be used, so it wasn't possible to level up endlessly through this method. In order to level a skill, the character first had to have learned it already. If the character hadn't learned it yet, the skill scroll would only be used on the weapon, which would allow the skill to be used at a skill level of 1. All of this was explained on the skill scroll. Tang Ru had put the Battle Spirit skill scroll on her Scarlet Moon Lance, which allowed her level 31 Soft Mist to learn the level 50 Awakening skill, Battle Spirit. The Christmas event was even more generous. With this scroll, Soft Mist was able to directly learn a maxed Battle Spirit. Of course, this would only be temporary and the game wasn't afraid of it messing up the game's balance. They wanted to let new players personally have a taste of what high-leveled skills were like. And due to this, it helped Tang Ru out tremendously. Tang Ru didn't really understand all of this. She had heard from Chen Guo that Battle Spirit was the Battle Mage's signature move, so she understood that quite well. After seeing this scroll in her inventory, she didn't hesitate to add it to her weapon. In ordinary circumstances, a normal skill scroll would only allow her to use a level 1 Battle Spirit, which would only allow her to reach the first stage, and the first stage wouldn't be enough power. But because of the event, a max-level Battle Spirit allowed Soft Mist to explode with power. A sudden increase of 260 strength at level 31 was much more terrifying than having that increase at level 50 or level 70, because the proportional strength gained was completely different. Wind Following Sword quickly understood, but it was already too late. Even though he was experienced, there was no way that he could have anticipated this situation. Wind Following Sword was thrown onto the ground. His health rapidly decreased and he was only at health now. Attacks with a 260 strength increase were way too difficult to bear. Wind Following Sword immediately drank a potion. He wouldn't give up so easily. The 7th stage was terrifying, but it wasn't without a weakness. Battle Spirit was a passive skill. After a battle mage learned it, they would grow stronger with more combos. However, the buff depended upon the combos and wasn't as stable. For example, Tang Ru's Soft Mist had reached a 120-hit combo from the monsters. If she stopped attacking, she would still have the 7th stage buff, and if she kept on fighting, she would still be fighting at the 7th stage. But her next attack would reset the Battle Spirit's combo count. If her combos stopped at 10 in the next round of attacks, her 7th stage buff would wear off and she would only have a 1st stage buff. In other words, if she wanted to maintain her 7th stage buff, then every time she did a round of attacks, she would have to keep doing 120 hit combos. When Soft Mist rushed forward, she used all of the skills she had at her disposal in order to create a combo. If she stopped comboing, her 7th stage buff would immediately wear off, and Wind Following Sword understood this better than Tang Ru did. As a result, as long as he dodged or interrupted the next attack, a scarlet light flashed. Wind Following Sword was still thinking the plan through when Soft Mist's attack connected. The previous circle swing knocked him down, disabling him from using a quick recover. Wind Following Sword was suddenly scared. In terms of mechanics, he never was fit to be her opponent. And now that his opponent had the 7th stage buff with an attack speed increase of 6 and a 24% increase in movement speed, along with the movement speed buff from the neutral chasers, how was he going to dodge her attacks? Just as he was thinking about neutral chasers, one of Soft Mist's neutral chasers slammed into Wind Following Sword's head. Luckily, the neutral chaser did magic damage, so it wasn't affected by the strength boost and the damage was normal. However, as the neutral chaser exploded, Soft Mist swung her lance and launched him into the air with a sky strike. "I can't escape," Wind Following Sword cried. If Soft Mist used all her skills, his life would certainly end. However, if Soft Mist killed him, then she'd also die as well due to the attacks from the oncoming monsters. Wind Following Sword knew it was over, but he still held a bit of hope. As Wind Following Sword thought of this, he suddenly saw an item roll towards Soft Mist's feet. Wind Following Sword immediately laughed madly. He turned his camera midair and saw a person's hand pulling back. Bang! A grenade exploded under Soft Mist's feet, knocking her aside. Even though she quickly used a quick recover and didn't get knocked to the ground, Soft Mist's 7th stage battle spirit immediately wore off. "Ha ha ha, girl, you and I aren't the only ones playing the game." Wind Following Sword laughed in glee. Tang Ru felt depressed. She had already seen that there was someone on a rooftop nearby, and there were also more players coming from the far end of the street. She knew that this time she was out of luck. "You're quite right." At this moment, Tang Ru suddenly heard a voice. The voice was very close, as if it were coming from next to her. The King's Avatar Volume 4 Pursuit Chapter 272 Ups and Downs. Who is it? Wind Following Sword turned his camera around to find the speaker. "It's a game. Calling for help if you're in trouble isn't anything shameful. Look at this bro. He has the advantage and he's asking for help. That awareness and that decision-making is something you should learn." Tang Ru had already figured out who the speaker was. She looked at Ye Xiu, who was talking to her. His voice had spread out both from outside and inside the game. Between these two, Chen Guo was focused on her own screen and didn't seem as if she intended on moving. But this didn't fit with her personality. Her current dignified look only made it seem even stranger. Tang Ru immediately guessed that Chen Guo had seen that her situation wasn't looking good, so she had gone to find Ye Xiu, who rushed over to help. "What are you looking at? The monsters are coming," Ye Xiu said. Tang Ru hastily turned her head. The swarm of monsters were still targeting her. Soft Mist didn't have much health left and her potions were on cooldown. Before this, it had been very difficult to find an opportunity to attack Wind Following Sword. After finding the opportunity, she had ignored everything else. As long as the monsters didn't interrupt her, she wouldn't care. Even if she herself died, she had to bring Wind Following Sword down with her. It had originally been possible, but then a helper had suddenly appeared. This splash of cold water had caused Tang Ru to become somewhat dispirited. But to her surprise, Ye Xiu had also arrived at this moment. She liked to solve her problems on her own. But she now found out that during a crisis, someone pulling her out of it felt wonderful. She had never felt this sort of up and down feeling before. Tang Ru was distracted by her feelings. The monsters had once again pounced on her and her health was almost red. The monsters had already surrounded her. It was true that Ye Xiu had come, but could he get her out of this mess? She had these types of thoughts in her head, but Tang Ru wouldn't give up so easily. A falling flower palm, which was originally meant for wind-following sword, instead hit several monsters in front of her and blew them away. At this moment, loud bangs exploded nearby. The monsters on her left and right had been thrown tumbling into the air by the explosions. In the previous second, they had her surrounded. In the next second, they were sent into a mess. A white light fell onto her body, Lord Grimm's heel. Next, Lord Grimm jumped down from the rooftop and landed next to Soft Mist. The sound of a Gatling gun came from the rooftop. The flying bullets headed directly towards the rooftop of the opposing Spitfire. The Spitfire immediately dashed along the road. The Gatling gun chased after his footsteps. The tiles on the rooftop shattered into pieces, but not a single bullet landed on his body. At this moment, he felt as if his dodging had been extremely beautiful, but then he heard 3 shots and saw 3 anti-tank missiles whistling towards him. The Spitfire had thought that he had dodged well, but in reality, his opponent had fired in that way in order to lure him into firing range. The 3 anti-tank missiles had been out of his expectations and were in a triangle formation too. Locked into a certain area, he had nowhere to run. The Spitfire jumped down to the side. But as soon as he jumped, the explosion sent out a shockwave, sending him flying to the other side of the street. "Hurry up and kill your Christmas thief. I'll help you block them," Ye Xiu said to Tang Ru. Tang Ru looked around her. The Christmas thief had been in the middle. It had just been knocked down. After getting up, it headed directly towards her. Tang Ru immediately had Soft Mist meet up and give it a beating. The other monsters also tried to rush forward, but Sima Cheng's cleansing mist threw down a charged-up cannonball, scattering them into the wind like kites. Tang Ru's Soft Mist had already joined their party, so she wasn't affected by the blast. Even though it was still a situation of few versus many, with Sima Cheng's help, the remaining monsters were few enough for Tang Ru to deal with. As for Ye Xiu, he was controlling his Lord Grimm and heading towards Wind-Following Sword. Wind-Following Sword saw him clearly. His enthusiasm died down, and instead of fighting, he turned tail and ran. Within moments, Tang Ru was no longer in any great danger. Chen Guo let out a sigh of relief, but her feelings were complicated. This was because Wind-Following Sword's style and name were very similar to someone whose id she recognized. Heavenly Domain. An old veteran of Excellent Dynasty, or a Following Sword. When Chen Guo joined Excellent Dynasty, she often heard of his treachery. Correct, Chen Guo was also a member of Excellent Dynasty. She had always been a loyal fan of Excellent Era, so of course she had wanted to join Excellent Dynasty. Her chasing haze wasn't bad, and Chen Guo's skill level was decent. She was good enough to join these guilds and had gotten into Excellent Dynasty quite smoothly. She had been a member up until now, so she had a few friends in there. Aura Following Sword was a very famous expert in the guild. Chen Guo and her friends with their normal accounts never really had the chance to ever play with these experts. But these experts' activities were often the topic of their discussion. Aura Following Sword often performed devious deeds against other guilds' players. To guild members like Chen Guo, it was very fun to hear about, so she had a good impression of him. But today, when she saw his treachery in action, it was towards the friend sitting next to her. Chen Guo suddenly felt that this person wasn't very nice. Her concept of treachery had already turned completely negative. Chen Guo hadn't seen the reason that it had all started, but Soft Mist had to deal with a large mob of monsters, while Wind-Following Sword just ran around, not leaving. Tang Ru ground her teeth and tried to kill him. This scene was enough to make Chen Guo make a few guesses. Chen Guo understood Tang Ru's personality. Even though an expert like Ye Xiu was nearby, she knew that Tang Ru would never ask for help, so Chen Guo asked for help in her place. One side was a member from her guild, while the other side was her friend, which made Chen Guo feel a bit awkward on the inside. Due to her close friendship with Tang Ru and from a justice viewpoint, Chen Guo didn't hesitate to stand by Tang Ru's side. Now that she was looking at things from a different angle, her only desire now was to see that wind-following sword whose treachery she used to adore have his head splatter against the wall. Huh, why'd he run? Chen Guo pretended to be playing, but in reality her character was running randomly around the map. She glanced sideways from time to time at Ye Xiu as he was about to teach the devious wind-following sword a lesson. But how could she know wind-following sword would suddenly turn tail and run? Chen Guo was disappointed and blurted it out. Seeing that Tang Ru was looking at her, Chen Guo hastily adjusted her seat while hitting her keyboard as if she was playing. "You're not going anywhere." Tang Ru was currently fighting a few monsters but couldn't resist chuckling. "What are you acting for?" "Ha ha." Chen Guo saw that she had been found out and didn't explain herself. She openly watched the battles on the two screens. She wanted to see the situations on both sides, so her head was constantly turning left and right like a pellet drum. Wind-following sword was heading towards the street ahead in order to pick up his friend because he knew of Lord Grimm's identity. Chen Yehui had to manage such a large guild, and in the end, he still needed a few trusted aides. In Excellent Dynasty, he didn't dare mention that they were going to fight against Ye Xiu. However, as his trusted aide, Wind-Following Sword still knew about this reality. No matter how experienced or how devious Wind-Following Sword was, he doubted that he had the ability to fight with a god like Ye Xiu. Seeing Lord Grimm come towards him, and without a helper at his own side, Wind-Following Sword was trembling. He trembled out a turn and tapped the keyboard to sprint away and wished that he had a skill like battle spirit to hasten his movement. However, running away was a hope of his. Whether he could actually do it was a different matter. Ye Xiu used the shadow clone technique. Lord Grimm immediately teleported a distance, lifted his hands and threw out a grenade. He didn't throw it at Wind-Following Sword's feet and instead threw it in front of him. Wind-Following Sword knew that if he kept going forward, he would be sent flying back by the grenade. His only choice was to go around the explosion. But going around it cost him time, and the distance between them immediately closed by a few steps. Triple slash. Wind-Following Sword wanted to use this skill to move faster, but then he heard a hum from behind him. He turned his head and saw Lord Grimm coming in with an assassin's shining cut, which was faster than Triple Slash's movement speed. Wind-Following Sword panicked. He was about to be caught, and he was still some distance away from his friend. Ye Xiu. The person who was about to catch him was Ye Xiu. Bang! A gun sound rang out from behind him. The distance was too close. Wind-Following Sword didn't have any time to react. Even if he couldn't dodge it, he had to keep running. Wind-Following Sword continued to tap his keyboard like mad but discovered that his character wasn't able to move. SHT. A stun bullet. The stun bullet's stun didn't last long. Shortly after, he began running again. Bang! Another gun sound, even closer this time. There was even less time to react. Wind-Following Sword was launched into the air by the bullet. Floating bullet. Wind-Following Sword muttered in his head. The King's Avatar Volume 4 Pursuit Chapter 273. A measure of an expert's skill, no matter how badly Wind-Following Sword wanted to escape after being launched into the air. It wasn't going to happen. All he heard was a bang and the blast, which lifted up the rainwater and looked as if it would splash him from inside screen onto his face. Wind-Following Sword was sent flying away. He adjusted his camera and prepared to quick recover in order to land safely. But right when he turned his camera, he discovered that there was a monster in the direction he was flying towards. Wind-following sword was brimming with joy. If he hit that monster, it would count as Lord Grimm's attack. The monster would then naturally go and return the blow, and as a result, his would have a higher chance of escaping. The heavens had truly blessed him today. Wind-following sword continued to dream, and then, in the blink of an eye, his character reached the monster. But when his body flitted across, the two didn't bump into each other. They were off by just an inch. FCK. Wind-following sword fell into despair. He immediately prepared to quick recover. His character rolled onto the ground, and when he got up, he saw a cold glint flash across his eyes. So quick, Wind-following sword was startled. But in the next second, he saw the situation clearly. The incoming attacker wasn't Lord Grimm, but rather it was that monster. Wind-following sword stared blankly. At this moment, he wanted to cry, but no tears came out. When he flew by, he hadn't hit the monster, but instead, he had landed in the monster's aggro range, which was why the Sin City resident had locked onto him. Wind-following sword immediately rolled again in order to dodge the attack. With his skill, dealing with a single monster was very easy. However, the bigger problem was, what was Lord Grimm going to do next? Wind-following sword turned his camera to look. Sure enough, Lord Grimm was dashing towards him. His dream, where the monster would aggro onto Lord Grimm and let him escape, didn't happen. On the contrary, the monster had aggroed onto him and had given Lord Grimm a chance to kill him. Wind-following sword was in an even more panicked state now. He saw Lord Grimm lift up his weapon and shoot. If the bullet was another weird Spitfire bullet, then if he was hit, the damage he would take as a result of the status effect wouldn't be good for him. Wind-following sword had to avoid it. Panicked, he sidestepped in a random direction in order to dodge the shot, and then he heard a hee-hee chuckle from behind him. Wind-following sword immediately turned around to look. A figure that had originally been crouching at the corner stood up and headed towards him. Wind-following sword wanted to cough up blood. He hadn't been very careful when he dodged the bullet, and as a result, he had unexpectedly stepped into the aggro range of another monster and aggroed it as well. Wind-following sword hastily tried to get out of its range, but after only taking a few steps, he heard footsteps closing in. His hesitation had allowed Lord Grimm to close in. He couldn't beat him one-on-one, but he had to do something to delay him. Wind-following sword grinded his teeth. He turned around and sent out a sword draw. FCK me. Wind-following sword cursed. Behind him, Lord Grimm jumped up into the air. The sword draw swept under his feet, missing him. But behind Lord Grimm were another two monsters, and those two monsters were hit. The two monsters had originally been aggroed onto Lord Grimm, but after being hit by the sword draw, their attention turned to Wind-following sword. They brandished their blades and pounced on him. 4. Now that things had escalated to this, how could Wind-following sword not know what was going on? Accidentally stepping into a monster's aggro range, and Lord Grimm bringing two monsters behind him wasn't just a coincidence. This was pure revenge. Lord Grimm was using the method he had used previously to play around with soft mist back at him. However, Lord Grimm's method was superior. Being able to blow him away into the aggro range was a reflection of his skill. Sweat could be seen on Wind-following sword's head. He could still deal with 4 monsters, but Lord Grimm. He looked at him and discovered that Lord Grimm wasn't in a rush to attack him. Does he want to attract even more monsters? Wind-following sword immediately thought this and began paying more attention to his surroundings. This was originally a leveling area, so there were monsters every few steps. Wind-following sword looked around and saw that any one of them could turn into his enemy at any time. Careful, careful. Wind-following sword observed his surroundings and observed Lord Grimm's movements. But Lord Grimm didn't seem to have too much interest in any of these monsters. He didn't actively aggro them. For a moment, Wind-following sword wasn't sure what the opponent was thinking. What was Ye Xiu thinking? Wind-following sword looked at the end of the street. His friends were rushing over to his rescue. Truthfully, Wind-following sword didn't believe they could beat Ye Xiu, but he did believe that, with more people, things would become more chaotic, and his chances of escaping would be greater as a result. Just as he thought this, he suddenly saw a figure on the rooftop move. The Spitfire who had been knocked down by Su Mucheng previously had finally climbed back up. He looked over the street's circumstances and immediately headed towards Wind-following sword in order to help him. He held a grenade in his hands, and after taking a few steps forward, he quietly threw it behind Lord Grimm. Wind-following sword's heart was about to leap up to his throat. If the grenade hit, then he'd have some hope in escaping. The grenade arced down. As long as it hit the ground, it would explode. But who would have thought that, at this moment, Lord Grimm would suddenly turn around and draw his sword simultaneously. The grenade that had been thrown downward was sliced by the sword light and immediately exploded. Wind-following sword felt that it was a pity. Soon after, he saw the sword being sheathed. Lord Grimm changed his weapon once again, and flames spouted out of his gun. The Spitfire on the rooftop was still changing his ammunition in order to get ready for his next attack. By the time Wind-following sword warned him, it was already too late. Lord Grimm had fired anti-tank missiles at him. The Spitfire didn't have time to dodge, and the explosion blasted him onto the streets once more. Wind-following sword looked on, dumbstruck. He still knew what was what. Everything that had happened in that instant showed Lord Grimm's incredible skill. The number of players who could hit a grenade in midair wasn't high. And the anti-tank missiles had used the grenade's light and noise as a cover. This was why Wind-following sword was able to understand what had happened, while that Spitfire had no idea what had happened. For that Spitfire, Lord Grimm's shots had been completely covered up by the grenade's explosion. By the time he saw the missiles, it was already too late to dodge. Using such a small detail wasn't easy. It meant that he completely grasped the opponent's position, the opponent's field of view, the effects of the grenade's explosion, and his extremely quick hands ensures that he could complete his attack at the moment of explosion. Wind-following sword once again decided to turn tail and run. The more experienced you were, the better you would understand how terrifying this was. Wind-following sword understood this. He no longer desired to try and block Lord Grimm. Whether he could escape now depended on his luck. Wind-following sword didn't even look back when he ran. Run forward. He didn't care what was happening behind him. He didn't want to know how far away Lord Grimm was from him or whether or not he had aggroed more monsters. The only thought in his mind was to run and to continue running. Guns sound. Wind-following sword didn't look back. He only shifted his direction slightly. Whether he could dodge or not depended on his luck. Another shot. Wind-following sword twisted his body, but he still didn't turn his head. Gun sounds continued to ring. Wind-following sword continued to zigzag. His health hadn't gone down and he hadn't been hit. Wind-following sword's hopes were once again reignited. Could he have somehow awakened his true potential in a moment of crisis? Was his potential so great that he could dodge like this? Bang, 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 bang. Amidst these gun sounds, Wind-following sword's health still hadn't gone down. He felt as if he was sliding over the water. So graceful, Wind-following sword complimented himself. Soon after, from another point of view, he saw that something didn't seem quite right. It didn't matter. All he had to do was keep running. Wind-following sword didn't want to waste any time. Another gun sounded, and from the corner of his eyes he saw a flame. A figure appeared in Wind-following sword's field of view. It was Lord Grimm, who was currently flying backwards along the road. This was because he was using aerial fire. Wind-following sword cried. Lord Grimm had been using aerial fire the entire time to catch up to him. He had been twisting around as well because of the noise. That had probably made him look as if he had gone crazy, right? Your twisting looked pretty good. Wind-following sword quickly heard him praise. Wind-following sword stared at Lord Grim. He was ready to fight. It didn't matter who his opponent was. No matter how terrifying Lord Grim was, he didn't plan on just letting himself die. He wouldn't go down without a fight. Bang! Another stream of bullets. It had already become a reflex. When he heard the sound of bullets being fired, he couldn't help but twist. But these bullets weren't directed at him. It seems like you've gotten addicted. The other side laughed. Wind-following sword felt embarrassed. He used a sword draw and finally acted against Lord Grim. And so what? Even if he died, it was only a 10% experience loss. He could get that back in a day. Fight! Wind-following sword shouted. His slash gently flitted past Lord Grim. You even messed up who your opponent is. How sad, Ye Xiu said. Wind-following sword was startled. He had been too absorbed in listening to the gun sounds. He now noticed that he could hear footsteps quickly closing in. This is... Wind-following sword immediately turned around. A scarlet light flashed in front of his eyes, and he saw an id on top of the opponent's head. Soft Mist the King's Avatar Volume 4 Pursuit Chapter 274 Fight to the End. Tang Ru and Su Ma Cheng combined their efforts and brought the dozen high-leveled residents and the Christmas thief to their end. In the process of doing so, using the highest stage of battle spirit, Soft Mist did the majority of the damage. After clearing away the monsters, Tang Ru had Soft Mist chase after Wind-following sword. She was again in the 7th stage of battle spirit. The combination of the neutral chaser's movement speed buff and Wind-following sword's twisting and turning caused Soft Mist to quickly catch up. Wind-following sword had thought that Ye Xiu's Lord Grim was his opponent, but instead, Lord Grim had gifted him with 4 monsters to play with. At this moment, the player who was going to embarrass him was the player that he had originally played around with, Tang Ru. A scarlet light flashed in front of his eyes. By the time that Wind-following sword saw it, it was already too late to dodge. The scarlet moon lance slashed upwards with a sky strike. Wind-following sword was launched into the air. His body was still in the motion of turning his head. The lance quickly returned but came back with an even greater force. The lance pierced his stomach, lifted Wind-following sword, and threw him onto the ground. The direction of the swing had been calculated. Tang Ru learned from her mistakes. She executed a circle swing perfectly, and the shockwave hadn't aggroed any of the monsters chasing after Wind-following sword. As soon as Wind-following sword was thrown to the ground, those 4 residents took the opportunity to pounce on him. They surrounded and stabbed him while Wind-following sword was on the ground. In game speak, this was a true sweeping attack. Wind-following sword looked as if he was food for hungry wolves. In an instant, the residents surrounded him. Only his head could be seen and he looked powerless. Wind-following sword struggled to swing his sword. He slashed at a monster and then rolled away and got up. During that short moment, his health had already dropped to half from the 4 monsters bullying. But before he could relax, Soft Mist's lance arrived in front of him. This time, Wind-following sword was prepared and jumped back to dodge. But how could Tang Ru give up? She quickly followed up with another attack. Wind-following sword watched as his health was extorted. There was no way he could beat her and nowhere to run either. His camera turned left and right and then looked up towards the heavens, praying for some flying immortal to save him. In the end, all he heard was a bang. Wind-following sword's camera turned and saw someone on the rooftop. However, that someone wasn't his friend but Cleansing Mist. His Spitfire friend had been blown back onto the streets, but he didn't give up, and Ariel fired his way back up to the rooftop. However, his attempt this time was even more of a failure than the previous 2 times. As soon as he landed, he saw a black barrel directly in front of his face and was directly blasted away. He was hit by consecutive explosions. Unable to even stand up straight, he was once again sent back down to the streets. And this time, Sima Cheng no longer paid attention to anything else, concentrating on killing him. Meanwhile, on Ye Xiu's side, his Lord Grimm had moved up and blocked the players, who were coming to support their struggling friend. These players were obviously from excellent dynasty as well and knew of Lord Grimm's strength, but they didn't know that he was Ye Xiu. If they had, then they definitely wouldn't have come to kill themselves. How large was the difference between normal players and pro players? It was hard to answer because every player was at a different skill level. But during events hosted by a team, the pro players would sometimes give a performance. They would invite normal players to fight against them. One pro player would fight against several normal players, and the results of these exhibition matches didn't need to be said. However, these 5 excellent dynasty players didn't know that they were up against a top-tier god. They only knew that Lord Grimm was good, but there was no way they could have predicted that. The difference in their skill levels wasn't something that they could make up for by being careful and cautious. In this battle, Ye Xiu was up against 5, but he took the initiative to attack. Lord Grimm sprinted forward and easily dissolved the long-ranged character's attacks. The speed at which he closed in was out of their expectations. The melee players hastily attacked, but Lord Grimm had already sent out a sword draw. The sword aura swept over. To jump over the sword draw like Ye Xiu did required quick hands and fast eyes. It wasn't something that just anyone could do. For normal players, the most common method of avoiding this attack was to move backwards. To think of jumping backwards to dodge this attack meant that their reactions weren't too slow, but Ye Xiu had already predicted what they would do. His attack had been placed just right. The jumping backwards method was just a bit worse than Ye Xiu's. Most people wouldn't be able to see the distance of the attack extremely accurately. The players thought that they had dodged it, but in the end, they were hit. The sword aura swept at them and looked as if it had jumped a bit farther than usual. Since they were in Sin City, they definitely weren't bad players. After being blown away, their quick recoveries had been completed beautifully. But in the next second, they saw a blue light surround their bodies. The blue light rose up into the air as well as their bodies. Rising emblem. By the time they realized it, they searched for Lord Grimm, who wasn't moving. It was clearly a shadow clone, but where was the real body? The real body was obviously below them. Lord Grimm held his weapon and fired twice, sending one of the players away. Following after, the weapon changed to a battle lance. He raised it up and stabbed forward, sending another one flying away. He then turned around and raised his palm. A deafening noise followed, blowing away another. The battle lance then returned back into the gun form. Bang, bang, bang. 3 shots pushed another one away. During the time that they were launched into the air by the rising emblem, the originally clustered allies were suddenly split apart into different directions. The sole remaining member landed at his original position. This member was a long-ranged class and was quickly beaten up by Lord Grimm. As for those other 4 members, they experienced what Wind following Sprit experienced. Next to them were Sin City residents, who quickly attacked them. Each of them now had another partner. At this moment, should they get rid of their new partners? Or should they quickly rescue their long-ranged friend? Or should they continue trying to rescue the almost dead Wind following sword? They didn't have to think about it for too long because Tang Ru quickly helped them eliminate one of their options. Truthfully, if Wind following sword was in a true 1v1, with his experience and skill, he might not lose to Tang Ru. Unfortunately, he just had to play around. Now that Ye Xiu had taken revenge, he had to worry about the aggroed monsters. As for Tang Ru, she was at the 7th stage of battle spirit. Her attacks were faster and stronger. There was no way that he could 1v1 her, let alone her with 4 helpers. Fight, Wind following sword thought. He had already made the decision before, but he had mixed up his opponent. This time he decided again, but his energy had already withered away. He did fight, but as expected, he died fighting. With Wind following Sword's death, the 5 players who had come no longer had a purpose. They had quickly charged forward to save the friend whom Lord Grim was beating up and now wanted to run away. But how could it be so easy? Leaving was going to be even harder. Tang Ru had cleaned up Wind following Sword, and Sima Cheng had killed off that Spitfire as well. Now it was a 3v5 fight, something that the 5 players didn't notice. In a short moment, the first player on the other side fell. Quickly, the second and third players followed. Wind following Sword had died, and none of the friends he had called for help had survived either. Amidst the rain, Soft Mist stood up valiantly like before. She was the last to stay standing because she had 2 friends beside her. Amazing, amazing, Chen Guo commented. She had watched the entire course of action. Not just the culprit, but his other helpers were also all killed. And the entire process had been a steamroll. It really made her feel good. Chen Guo was extremely happy. She only regretted that their allied launcher wasn't her. She was already looking forward to playing with Ye Xiu and Tang Ru, and these two must be happy after such a beautiful battle, right? Chen Guo looked to the right, and all she saw was Ye Xiu as calm as ever. No, it looked like he was bored. The guy didn't look energetic at all, and the way he looked sitting there made her angry. "It's all good now. You can continue questing," Ye Xiu said. "Okay." Tang Ru replied, "That's it, just like that." Chen Guo didn't want to believe it. A great fight had just ended. They didn't even talk about it for a bit. They were just going to quietly move on and continue questing. If this had been her, such an intense battle, where she had finally won in the end, was something that she could talk about with her friends for an entire week. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 275. There must not be losses on the leaderboard. Wind following Sword revived in Kanji City. None of his equipment had dropped, but the 10% experience drop was enough to make his heart ache. But what made him even sadder was the turning point mid-battle. He had originally thought that taking the Christmas thief was absolutely safe. How could he know that so many side issues would pop up? In the end, not only did he die, but his friends who had come to save him had also all died. Not long after Wind following Sword died, he saw his friends come one after the other. They all revived next to him. The characters stood there stupidly, and not a word was said. Go back and take revenge. With just them, Wind following Sword didn't dare try. After all, he knew that Lord Grim was Ye Xiu, and obviously knew that Cleansing Mist was Sima Cheng as well. In addition, that Soft Mist was also strong too. There was no use trying with just them. The only way was to rely on many, and the only way to do that was to rely on the guild. But right now, the entire guild was working on the Christmas quests. Wind following Sword had only done the kill stealing on a whim. He hadn't talked about it with Chen Yehui. Chen Yehui also never told them what to do if they encountered Ye Xiu and his comrades. In the end, Wind following Sword acted for himself and left dejected and depressed. He didn't even know how he would report it to Chen Yehui yet. And the players next to him weren't his close friends either. They were simply a part of the hunting group. At that time they were nearby and had been called over by Wind following Sword to their deaths. "Lord Grim really is incredible," someone finally said. "He is." Wind following Sword parroted. Exaggerating Lord Grim's strength could ease their thoughts. "If we knew earlier, then we should have called more people over," another said. "He wasn't there in the beginning." Wind following Sword hastily excused himself, but he wasn't wrong. When he called them over, Lord Grim wasn't there yet. "What do we do now? Call for more brothers?" One of them clearly wasn't happy and wanted revenge. Wind following Sword was also thinking about this issue. Just as he was about to answer, a new message came. Wind following Sword opened it and saw that it was Chen Yehui. "What happened?" "You know about it already." Wind following Sword felt awkward. Power leveling in the new server was extremely important. The team's deaths had caused them to lose experience and morale, which was completely against what they were going for. "It's being talked about in the chat," Chen Yehui replied. "Oh no." Wind Following Sword immediately checked the guild chat. The bros next to him were all talking about it angrily. No wonder none of them had been talking when they had revived. They had been chatting in the guild's chat room. I encountered Soft Mist. Seeing that the guild leader already knew Wind Following Sword could only explain. He stressed that at that time he felt like he had it 100%, which was why he had acted out. He didn't think that Soft Mist would be so tenacious and hold out for so long. When he had discovered that he was in trouble, he then called people over. But the other side had also called for help, and then they all got wiped out. "How could you guys be their opponents?" Ye Xiu said. "Yeah," Wind Following Sword felt gloomy. "Ye Xiu, he really is bringing trouble to us wherever he goes," Ye Xiu said. Yeah, Wind Following Sword added while still being gloomy. "Trouble. It was more like he was the one who had caused trouble and then their opponents had taken revenge, right?" "Did you look at the Christmas hunting leaderboards?" Ye Xiu asked. "I saw it, we're way ahead," Wind Following Sword said. "I'm talking about the individual one, level 3135. Oh, Wind Following Sword immediately went to check. The first page showed the first 20 places, with the rankings making Wind Following Sword feel pleased. Of the first 20 places, their excellent dynasty held the first 15, with him at 9th place. Wind Following Sword obviously knew the reason they were able to hold the first 15 places. This was something they had created. For example, for Wind Following Sword's party, the other party members would gather all of their Christmas thieves to him. As a result, this let him easily take a high placing. As for the other 14 players on the leaderboards, they were all the same. This time, Excellent Dynasty's advantage in manpower was finally showing. The other guilds also had their first string players come to Sin City, but they didn't have nearly as many players as Excellent Dynasty did. The current Excellent Dynasty was quite weak in the Heavenly Domain, though, because many of their experts went to the 10th server. In the Heavenly Domain, the competition there was in a deadlock. There was no way of breaking it in a short amount of time. Ye Xiu had put everything at stake and invested heavily into the 10th server. They had to be in a leading position. Currently, things weren't going too well. Even though they took down Frost Forest, Liu Hao stopped helping them, and the later top dungeon records had come under the monopoly of Lord Grimm. However, Ye Xiu had learned from this. Now whenever they moved out, they would always weigh the pros and cons first and wouldn't act out on impulse. Check the 11th page. Ye Xiu messaged Wind Following Sword. Wind Following Sword checked and immediately understood what the guild leader wanted him to see. Lord Grimm, 218th place. This guy's rising so quickly. Correct. He wasn't even on the leaderboards an hour ago. But now he's already risen to the 218th place. Even though the difference in points is still very large between him and us, I've calculated it, and at his speed, after 3 hours, he'll have entered our ranks. And you know who Cleansing Mist, the one on the 14th page, is, right? She'll also rise up sooner or later, but for her she probably won't have the time to maintain her record, so we don't have to worry too much about that. However, it's hard to say about that guy. Ye Xiu replied. But even if they rise up, we still have the majority, Wind Following Sword said. Do you still not understand? As long as he rises up, the public will be entirely focused on him. No one would care about how outstanding our achievements are. All they would pay attention to is the fact that Lord Grimm has once again stepped all over us again. You look at any dungeon record from any other server. Can you say that the second place record is bad? But what about in the 10th server? All of the records he tramples over are all terrible compared to his. The entire guild immediately looks like trash. Has this ever happened in any other server? He's the entire reason for this unhealthy trend. So you're saying, Wind Following Sword was starting to understand Ye Xiu's intent. That's why we definitely can't let him climb up the ladder. We can't let this little rat spoil our porridge. Chen Yehui's message seemed to have sound and color to it. Wind-following sword saw Chen Yehui's determination. He was someone very close to Chen Yehui in the guild and understood the relationship between Chen Yehui and Ye Xiu. This time Chen Yehui had thought the plan through, but were there some personal reasons mixed in? Wind-following sword didn't ask. Perhaps this was for the better. The guild's and his own personal interests were in alignment. "What do you think we should do?" Wind-following sword asked. "I'll give you some players, you deal with it. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to fight him. As long as you delay him, that's enough. You think of a method." Chen Yehui handed the task to Wind-following sword. Wind-following sword's craftiness was famous in the heavenly domain. Against Ye Xiu, fighting him with brute force clearly wouldn't work. It would require lots of effort and time, and it might even end up biting them back. But through more secretive methods, letting Lord Grimm silently suffer a bit would be better. Wind-following sword was undoubtedly the most suitable choice. Even if he was the one to personally move out, he might not be as cunning as Wind-following sword. "All right, I'll do it." Wind-following sword wanted to take some revenge too. He was quite confident in himself here. Ye Xiu was undoubtedly a top-tier god, but his many years of playing had been aimed towards the way professionals played against each other. In the game, things weren't as simple as just winning and losing matches. Wind-following sword decided that he would have this god taste the wisdom and tricks of an in-game player. As he thought, Wind-following sword checked the Christmas hunting leaderboards. Terrible. They had only talked for a bit and Lord Grimm had already risen. He had been at 218th place before. Now he was at 211th. There was no time to delay. He had to hurry up and start moving. Wind-following sword went on his way towards Sin City. While contacting the helpers Chen Yehui had given to him the King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 276, The Web's Lord Grimm's Sin City. Thunder and lightning continued to flash in the sky from time to time as the rain continued to pour down. Lord Grimm and Soft Mist were split up in the city. Both of them were searching for Christmas thieves. Ye Xiu and Tang Ru quietly tapped their keyboards and clicked their mice. Apart from their typing, there was no other sound. Chen Guo was sitting between these two. She was running around with her chasing haze in the heavenly domain. She was running and running. Plunk. Chasing haze fell into a hole. FCK. Chen Guo immediately had chasing haze jump out of the hole. She wasn't able to focus. In the previous PK, she had been the most excited one there, even though she was a spectator. Helpless, Chen Guo drank a sip of water and continued to run around aimlessly without a destination. For Christmas thieves, this was her progress up until now. In the previous hour, she had killed 3 of them, but during this hour, she hadn't made much progress. Because she was watching the 2 of them play, she was still a bit distracted. Whenever she found one, another player would always snatch it first. When someone else got to it first, Chen Guo would always quietly walk away. But this didn't mean that such situations were always peacefully resolved. Killing another player and stealing the monster was a common tactic that was taking place all over. The heavenly domain was truly a survival of the fittest world. Danger could come from anywhere. Since there wasn't any penalty for peeking here and the experience as well as the item drops were larger, killing other players for their items was a common occurrence. Perhaps not everyone liked the heavenly domain's atmosphere, but the heavenly domain wasn't a place that players were forced to go to. The players had a choice. However, the heavenly domain had better equipment, better materials, stronger bosses, and harder dungeons, which were enough incentives to make players constantly enter. If that enticement wasn't strong enough, most would probably stay in the normal servers to play. Chen Guo had once been attacked and had her equipment drop. She had been so angry that she had stopped playing for a whole week and had even wanted to go back to the old server. But not long after, she had climbed back onto the heavenly domain. This place had this type of magic to it. But currently, Chen Guo didn't feel good about the heavenly domain at all. She rigidly pressed forward. Her hands were almost numb. As for the two players beside her, both of them were clicking and tapping furiously. She didn't even need to look to know that they were constantly busy. In the new server in Sin City, there were too many monsters and not enough players. They never needed to walk far to see a Christmas thief. As a comparison, how could she like playing on the heavenly domain, running and running? She just couldn't snatch any Christmas thieves for herself. Chen Guo would sometimes measure herself against the two of them on her left and right. Gradually, she discovered that Ye Xiu had quieted down too. He was just like her. He seemed to only press forward and turn left and right stupidly. Chen Guo once again switched her attention to Ye Xiu's screen instead of hers. Lord Grimm went through the street into an alley looking everywhere. There seemed to be fewer Christmas thieves now, or perhaps, there were more players now. Wherever Lord Grimm went, either the Christmas thieves had already been killed or there were already players fighting them. Ye Xiu obviously didn't go and kill others to steal their monsters like Wind Following Sword did. All he could do was turn around and keep looking, but it always seemed to be this way. Chen Guo watched for half an hour. He had only killed 2 Christmas thieves in that time. In an advantageous place like Sin City, where Ye Xiu had previously killed 14 in an hour, killing 2 in half an hour was too strange. This could be seen from the leaderboards. During the half hour, Lord Grimm's name continued to fall. The system probably changed because you guys were too savage, no? Chen Guo suddenly said. Ye Xiu turned his head and looked at her. He lightly shook his head and said, "Something's not right." "What's not right?" Chen Guo asked. Ye Xiu didn't answer. He continued to patiently have Lord Grimm look around. Chen Guo obviously knew that the system couldn't have changed. Tang Ru was still busy fighting. It couldn't be that the change was only directed at Lord Grimm so that it would only change wherever he moved, right? Chen Guo continued to watch. Another half an hour passed. It was even worse this time. He had only killed 1. 3 Christmas thieves in 1 hour was Ye Xiu's achievement. Chen Guo didn't take the chance to take delight in his misfortunes. She also felt that something wasn't right either. "I've been surrounded," Ye Xiu said in response to Chen Guo's doubtful gaze. "Surrounded? Yeah, there's always people nearby." Ye Xiu pointed to a place not far away to a character who was killing a Christmas thief. "They've set up a net around me, moving along with me. They'll have gone to all the nearby areas ahead of time. If there are Christmas thieves, then they'll either lead them away or kill them. That's why I rarely find any I can kill." "Is that even possible?" Chen Guo stared blankly. "There's quite a lot of them. I just counted. There's 24 total." Chen Guo now understood that Ye Xiu hadn't been blindly searching, hoping for some luck. After figuring out that something wasn't right, his movements about were to examine the situation. Through this half an hour of examining, he was able to come to a conclusion. "Kill him," Chen Guo said. "That evil," Ye Xiu laughed. "If they don't hurt me, then I won't hurt them." Chen Guo told him her reasoning. "Then should I go and try?" Ye Xiu asked for her opinion. "Go," Chen Guo said as if she was in charge. As a result, Lord Grimm rushed forward, but before he could even get anywhere close, the player turned tail and ran. The Christmas thief obviously followed behind the player. No matter how good of a player Ye Xiu was, it would be very difficult for him to catch and kill it. Chen Guo watched, dumbstruck. "They've prepared well," Ye Xiu sighed. He checked the Christmas hunting leaderboards and saw that his rank had gone down by a lot. Ye Xiu checked the first page of the leaderboards. "Whoa, Excellent Dynasty is so mighty," Chen Guo blurted out. The first 15 places were held by Excellent Dynasty. Ye Xiu smiled but didn't say anything. A fan of Excellent Era would obviously be a fan of the in-game Excellent Dynasty. But Chen Guo understood. This type of painstaking work trying to make sure Ye Xiu didn't kill any Christmas thieves was clearly because of the competition between the two sides. The competition was for the ranking positions on the leaderboards. And the only people who had that type of power was undoubtedly in a guild. Ye Xiu's Lord Grimm didn't have a guild, so he was on the individual leaderboards. A guild still needed to suppress an individual. When Chen Guo saw the first 15 places, Chen Guo began to understand. Lord Grimm's name was rising up rapidly. He might soon knock one of them down, but the other 14 would still be there. Did they have to maintain all 15 places? Chen Guo couldn't understand this point because she didn't know the details of the 10th server. Chen Yehui's worries weren't groundless, however. If Lord Grimm really did step all over the leaderboards, then it was very possible that Excellent Dynasty's placings would immediately turn into nothing. When that time came, who knew what those stupid noobs would say? Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition had encountered it. Which guild wasn't afraid of that happening? Chen Yehui hadn't personally run over to the 10th server in order to witness a tragedy. Are these players from Excellent Dynasty? Chen Guo was somewhat unsure. Seems like it. Ye Xiu said, "What type of enmity do you guys have with each other?" Chen Guo didn't understand the 10th server's situation, so she could only think that Ye Xiu had some sort of quarrel with them. It's a long story. Then what are you going to do now? Chen Guo asked. Let me think, Ye Xiu said. Not bad. Meanwhile, Chen Yehui was also paying attention to the leaderboards. Lord Grimm's ranking was falling, and he knew that it was the result of his actions. Seeing that the effects were still going on after an hour, Chen Yehui happily sent Wind Following Sword a reward. "Ha ha, it's nothing," Wind Following Sword said modestly, though he was secretly extremely delighted. "How is he reacting?" Chen Yehui asked. After running around blindly for an hour, he seems to have just figured out that something isn't right. Wind Following Sword was already looking down on Ye Xiu's intelligence. Then he's probably going to move out soon. Be careful. Okay. I'll be waiting. One of Glory's 4 famous master tacticians. Actually, I've always wanted to test myself against them. I want to see for myself just how godly their tactics are. The clear achievements after an hour had put Wind Following Sword in high spirits. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 277, Spinning Spiderweb Formation, edited by Ryuji Ozora. Justin, title needs to be finalized. Chapter 277, Spinning Spiderweb Formation. Have you thought of a solution? Have you thought of a solution? Chen Guo was even more anxious than Ye Xiu was. I've thought of a very dependable method, but I need someone who's brave and smart enough for it. Ye Xiu said. What's the method? Chen Guo asked. Go to Club Excellent Era across the street and cut the lines. What do you think? Can you do it? FCK off. Chen Guo wasn't happy. He was clearly having fun with her. Ha ha. Ye Xiu laughed, but his hands had already begun moving. As Lord Grimm began to move again, he went into the alleys and ran around. Chen Guo didn't understand his intent. He seemed to be doing the same thing as he had been doing in the previous hour. He was just running around stupidly. Just as she was going to say something, Ye Xiu suddenly pointed his hands at her screen. Thief. Ah. Chen Guo immediately turned around and looked. Sure enough, there was a Christmas thief where Ye Xiu was pointing at. Without hesitating, she had Chasing Haze lift up her cannon and accurately fired at it. Chen Guo cheered and continued to fire, but still looked at Ye Xiu's screen from time to time. She wanted to know what the situation was like. Go and fight your thief. I'm going to be running around like this for a while, Ye Xiu said. Running around and doing what? Chen Guo asked. Observing their formation. Oh, Chen Guo actually wanted to keep asking, but she discovered that that previously lazy guy had disappeared. Right now, Ye Xiu was extremely focused. His eyes spun and spun, chasing after his extremely quick-moving character. He was clearly researching something seriously. Chen Guo decided not to say anything. She wouldn't bother him and went on to focus on her Christmas thief. Ye Xiu never stopped moving. Lord Grimm looked around in a small circle. The situation was still the same. The Christmas thieves that could be found had already been snatched away. After winding past 3 streets, Lord Grimm suddenly jumped up. He raised his weapon and used an aerial fire, jumping to the rooftop. After this, he jumped off with another aerial fire and headed directly towards the other side of the street. He had never done this before. When Wind-Following Sword received the report, he didn't think much of it. That's it. His thinking is too simple. What are his coordinates? Wind-Following Sword followed. The member had been prepared and sent him Lord Grimm's coordinates. Wind-Following Sword saw the coordinates and was immediately startled. Originally, after receiving Lord Grimm's coordinates, he would set up adjustments for their formation. But this set of coordinates was too familiar to him. This was because this set of coordinates was very similar to the set of coordinates he had just been at. Lord Grimm is nearby. When Wind-Following Sword became aware of this, his character immediately began to move. He turned around and sprinted towards the street. At the same time, he lifted his camera and checked the rooftops. Sure enough, Wind-Following Sword really did find Lord Grimm. He was standing on the rooftop looking down at him. How could Wind-Following Sword dare delay? He immediately used a triple slash to run. He was the same as his other team members. As soon as they saw Lord Grimm, they wouldn't wait until he got close to them. This was Wind-Following Sword's orders. No one posed a chance at facing Ye Xiu one-on-one. Having thoughts of fighting would only hold them back. After all, their guild's main mission was still to fight Christmas thieves. Is he chasing? Is he chasing? Wind-Following Sword didn't want to turn his head. He was afraid that turning his head would affect his movements. He listened closely. He didn't hear any footsteps or gun sounds. After a while, Wind-Following Sword finally turned around to take a look. He hadn't. There was no sign of Lord Grimm. There was just an empty field. Wind-Following Sword let out a sigh. As for his previous position, Wind-Following Sword recalled it and then quickly sent orders to the other team members. Not long after, another teammate reported back, sending him Lord Grimm's new coordinates. Wind-Following Sword looked and saw that he was still in their formation's range. He couldn't help but laugh coldly. Running around on the rooftops truly made things a bit more difficult, but was that it? Ye Xiu isn't anything much. Wind-Following Sword said to himself. Just as he closed the message, he glanced at his own coordinates. Why did it look familiar? These coordinates were very close to the ones that the team member had reported for Lord Grimm. Wind-Following Sword was startled again. He immediately wanted to run, but a figure suddenly landed in front of him. If that wasn't Lord Grimm, then who else could it be? So you know who I am? Ye Xiu smiled. Ye Xiu. Wind-Following Sword called out the name. He was feeling a bit panicked. Since they were a bit too close to each other, it was very possible that he wouldn't be able to get away. But luckily, the formation wouldn't fall apart with just one death. Even if he died, the formation would still continue on. Thinking of this, Wind-Following Sword calmed down and laughed. So you've actually caught up. But so what? I can't 1v1 you, so I'll die. But I'm sure you've already figured it out, right? Our goal isn't to PK with you. It's just a spinning spiderweb formation. Oh, you really deserve to be called God, Yi. You know your stuff. Wind-Following Sword's voice contained a bit of mocking in it. So what if he knew what it was? Wasn't he still helpless in front of it? Wind-Following Sword was delighted. But you don't. Did you know that I was the one who created the spinning spiderweb formation? Ye Xiu was still smiling. What did you say? Wind-Following Sword was startled. Do you have a map with you? When you go back to the city, clean up your teammates' positions. Ye Xiu said, and then had Lord Grimm dash forward. Wind-Following Sword brandished his sword in defense. However, he had been too startled by Ye Xiu's words. His thoughts were no longer on the battle. When Wind-Following Sword fell, he still hadn't figured out what had happened. He immediately decided to revive and have his teammates report their positions. Ye Xiu had created the spinning spiderweb formation. Wind-Following Sword didn't know that. He had accidentally discovered it while browsing around on the internet. It looked interesting, so he had studied it for a bit. He had also used it quite a few times over the years. If not, then he wouldn't have been so familiar with it. He really couldn't remember who the authors of the materials he had gathered were. Maybe Ye Xiu was one of them. If Ye Xiu was, he wouldn't be surprised. These types of gods, who had been playing since the start of the game, had written many guides. Wind-following sword really hadn't paid attention to who had created the spinning spiderweb formation. Wind-following sword couldn't deal with all of this. After receiving everyone's positions, he immediately found an online map outside of the game's window. The online map he had found was quite detailed. His mouse showed the coordinates. Wind-following sword lit up everyone's coordinates, and not long after, the formation was clearly shown. Lord Grimm's position had still been within the formation's area of control. There weren't any problems with it. Was it just a bluff? Wind-following sword thought as he continued to direct everyone. He had everyone head towards his previous location and revise their position. Not long after, the team members reported back with Lord Grimm's new coordinates. Wind-following sword no longer controlled his character and now focused only on sending messages and directing their movements. The online map had many functions. Right now, Wind-following sword felt like he was playing a strategy game. Ye Xiu, I want to see how you'll escape. Wind-following sword began to slowly recover from the previous scare. The corners of his mouth pricked up and he began laughing coldly again. Heart Needle, head east 2 blocks. Watch the right street. Minar, go up to the roof on your left. Sand, go back to that crossing behind you. Wind-following sword casually directed them. The more he played, the happier he became. He felt like he was playing with the opponent. And this opponent was a top-tier god in glory. That type of feeling was truly unprecedented. More messages came. Wind-following sword looked and saw Lord Grimm's coordinates again. Wind-following sword calmly checked the map and once again gave a string of orders. And after deploying his team, he suddenly discovered that there was a huge hole in his spinning spiderweb formation. How? Wind-following sword's feelings went up and down. He immediately had a team member head to fix that hole, but he quickly received new coordinates for Lord Grimm. Is he heading towards the opening? Wind-following sword nervously looked at the map. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 278 Break the Formation. The guest acts as the host sure enough. When he compared Lord Grimm's previous coordinates to his current one, he found that Lord Grimm was heading directly towards the hole in the formation. Judging from the time that the coordinates were sent, it looked as if Lord Grimm had changed directions very early on and very decisively. It seemed like he knew that there would be a hole here. Wind-following sword hastily messaged any nearby players to fix the hole. Judging by the distance, there was still enough time. However, his sudden dispatch caused another area without anyone there to appear. Based on the direction that Lord Grimm was moving towards, Wind-following sword decided that he should dispatch those who were far away from Lord Grimm to fill the gap. That was how the spinning spiderweb formation worked. But as soon as he had sent out the messages and heaved a sigh of relief, he then discovered that he had received another report of Lord Grimm's coordinates. Wind-following sword checked the report and immediately exploded. Lord Grimm had changed directions again. He had just given a bunch of orders and now they were all pointless. Lord Grimm was currently heading towards the gap they had left after adjusting their positions. Wind-following sword couldn't pay attention to anything else but Lord Grimm. He hastily sent another round of orders. And this time, in order to fix the gap, he had to adjust even more people, which meant he had to send out more messages. Wind-following sword hastily moved his hands and increased his hand speed. But instead of using them on playing the game, he used it to type faster. His character stood still in Quan Zhi City. He didn't have any time to take even a single step. In Sin City, Lord Grimm continued to advance, rushing forward in a straight line. No one was more clear on the principles of the spinning spiderweb formation than Ye Xiu. Actually, he didn't know who exactly was giving out the commands, but during his hour of running around, which Chen Guo had assumed he was still searching for Christmas thieves, in reality, Ye Xiu was actually observing his opponents. After an hour of observing, Ye Xiu understood how many players were on the other side's formation. Every time he saw their positions, he gradually grasped the positions of everyone in the spinning spiderweb formation. The 24 excellent dynasty players and their positions were constantly revolving in Ye Xiu's head. After this, Ye Xiu could predict what his opponents would do with every change in direction he made. However, he still had to confirm it. After all, if the person executing the formation was different, then the person's habits and adjustments might not follow his predictions. Ye Xiu was especially worried that the other side hadn't learned the formation well. If that was the case, then his carefully made predictions would be thrown off. However, in that case, breaking out of the formation would also be just as easy. If that were the case, he wouldn't need to do anything too technical. By testing the reactions in the formation for a bit, Ye Xiu discovered that his opponent knew what he was doing. His opponent had already grasped and understood the spinning spiderweb formation extremely well. But unfortunately, even so, the spinning spiderweb formation wasn't unbeatable. As the creator of the spinning spiderweb formation, even if there weren't any holes, Ye Xiu could create one. This type of hole couldn't really be considered a hole, but an innate flaw of the spinning spiderweb formation. This flaw laid in the commander. Because the orders given had to be extremely precise, every time there was a change in direction, the commander had to give almost every character in the formation an order. When the situation changed too quickly, the commander would have a hard time keeping up, and Lord Grimm, the spinning spiderweb formation's prey, was causing this to happen. After grasping the other side's formation, Ye Xiu immediately began to execute his plan. Killing Wind-Following Sword was the plan's first step. Wind-Following Sword was already killed, thus that area temporarily became empty. The commander had to make up for this, and from then on, the formation came under Ye Xiu's lead. Even though he wasn't the commander in a sense, he was the guide for the formation. How they moved depended entirely on him, and from here on out, Ye Xiu became the guest that acted as the host. By following the movements he had planned out beforehand, he would ultimately drive the other side's movements and continuously hasten his speed, creating an opening and allowing him to break through. A hole. There was one, but the hole wasn't big enough yet. Continue. Even though Ye Xiu didn't have an online map that he could use to grasp the entire situation, the map he had in his head was even clearer. The points on the online map were static, but in Ye Xiu's mind, the points were constantly moving. FCK. When Wind-Following Sword received another set of coordinates, he wanted to rock the table in frustration, but he was too busy moving. Lord Grimm once again headed towards the fault in the formation. There shouldn't be a fault in the spinning spiderweb formation, so why was there one here? Wind-Following Sword hastily gave orders as he pondered. He was reflecting back step by step to find where the problem had occurred. Finally, Wind-Following Sword's reflection found an answer. He locked onto the moment when he had died. The problem started there. Wind-Following Sword suddenly understood. The spinning spiderweb formation didn't require a precise number of players to work. If there was one fewer or one more, the movements were the same. However, the instant that he died, a blank space appeared in their 24-player formation. When he revived, he immediately went to fix it. The appearance of the crack was only for a brief moment. But now that he looked at it, he had lost. He hadn't been able to fix it, and instead, the more he tried to fix it, the greater the opening became, all the way until you could clearly see the opening if you looked at the map. Up until then, Wind-Following Sword was still somewhat clueless. But now he finally understood it after seeing Lord Grimm accurately rush towards the opening time and time again. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a scenario that the other side had created. Ye Xiu. He had originally been the prey in their net, but now he had already become the host. Right now, he was completely dictating how the net was being woven, and he himself. Even after understanding the situation, he still couldn't fix it. Wind Following Sword hastily gave out more orders. It was the same as before. He was pulling down one wall only to put up another. The opening in his spinning spiderweb formation was growing larger and larger. Not good. Sweat had already started forming on Wind Following Sword's head. He wasn't fighting, but his two hands sounded like they were tapping the keyboard even more furiously than they were in a battle. I can't keep up. Wind Following Sword discovered that with so many adjustments to make, by the time he sent them all out, would there still be enough time to keep Lord Grimm in the middle? Wind Following Sword grew nervous and worried, but his hands never stopped moving. Just a bit more. Just a bit more. Wind Following Sword encouraged himself repeatedly. Of the 23 players, Wind Following Sword was only able to give out 17 orders this time. He had to look at each player's position, determine each player's movements, and then give them an order. This wasn't as easy as it sounded. After sending the 17 orders, Wind Following Sword felt his hands becoming fatigued and his head ached. And then another message came. No way. Wind Following Sword fell into despair. Whenever an adjustment was made, someone would report Lord Grimm's coordinates. After this, he would go into a frenzy once again. How many times had he done this now? Wind Following Sword's fatigued hands opened the message, and tears immediately began streaming down his face. And sure enough, Lord Grimm once again changed routes. Wind Following Sword didn't even need to look at the online map to confirm it, because he already had experience with this. Lord Grimm must be going towards the opening. Where was the opening? How could Wind Following Sword not know? He didn't want an opening to be there, but there was nothing that he could do about it. This was because ever since the first crack in the formation had appeared as a result of his death, Lord Grimm had led the way to widen the opening. Wind Following Sword hoped that he could have some time to fix it, but he didn't. Lord Grimm's movements never gave him the chance to. In other words, up until now, Wind Following Sword hadn't been able to switch from a 24-player formation to a 23-player formation yet. Everything began when he died. But Wind Following Sword continued to persevere, thinking, making the decision, and giving the orders. His head hurt and his hands almost felt like they weren't his own. This time, Wind Following Sword gave orders to 19 players. This was a contest. Wind Following Sword clearly understood that even though he couldn't see his opponent, the movement of the red dot on his map was in a struggle with him, as if they had fiercely clasped hands together and were arm wrestling. This was no longer the casual and easygoing leading that he did in the beginning. At this moment, Lord Grimm was repeatedly battering and tearing down his net. He won't break out. Wind Following Sword finished 19 messages. He had done it. In that instant, he felt extremely satisfied because he had completed a difficult challenge. Before this, he hadn't believed that he could accomplish such a feat in such a short amount of time. It was all simply a miracle. Sure enough, his true potential only came out against a worthy opponent. Wind Following Sword looked at the red dot on the map as well as the opening that had appeared again. Lord Grimm once again headed towards it. He wouldn't be flustered this time, because he had already accomplished a great feat. He was confident that he could continue on with this situation. He was completely prepared. Wind Following Sword's spirits roused. He waited for the report back and waited for those coordinates. This time he had built up his confidence and suddenly began to enjoy this type of challenge. Wind Following Sword waited and waited. But this time, the prompt report never came. Wind Following Sword began to ask for it himself. He asked the players in front of Lord Grimm, 1, 2, 3. He asked them all, but none of them had seen Lord Grimm. Wind Following Sword fell dumbstruck. If the spinning spiderweb formation couldn't grasp the prey's location, then that could only mean one thing. The prey had escaped the web. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 279. I can persuade them. The feeling of falling from the heavens down to the earth was something that Wind-Following Sword understood now. Letting Lord Grim escape wasn't too bad, but the worst part was that Lord Grim had crushed Wind-Following Sword's confidence. He had just built it up and was filled with tremendous self-confidence, only for it to be destroyed in an instant. He had originally thought that what he had been doing was amazing, but it had actually been pointless work. When he pulled off the feat, Lord Grim had already rushed out of the opening. In the end, he had been able to escape. Wind-Following Sword's fingers had turned numb for real this time, spinning spiderweb formation. The word spinning pointed to maintaining a constant circle around the target. Even if the target didn't react intensely, the players in the formation had to keep on moving, especially since, this time, Excellent Dynasty's goal was to clear away all the Christmas thieves around Lord Grim, which required them to move even more. Having not received any orders for a while, some of the players were beginning to message him, asking what was up. Lord Grim is already gone. Wind-Following Sword replied without any embarrassment, only disappointment. Ah. Wind-Following Sword sent another round of orders, but this time, it was to have the players pull back and monitor the entire area. The visibility in Sin City wasn't good. Maybe Lord Grim had intentionally stopped moving in some spot. This seemed to be their last line of hope, but Wind-Following Sword wasn't expecting anything. The reality was as Wind-Following Sword had predicted. Lord Grim was already outside of the spinning spiderweb formation. Where did he go? He didn't know at the moment and would have to look. We failed, Wind-Following Sword messaged Ye Xiu. What? Lord Grim escaped from our control, Wind-Following Sword said. That doesn't matter, you guys were still able to delay him for an hour. In this hour his ranking has been dropping. This is all because of your efforts. Keep up the good work, Ye Xiu said. Wind-Following Sword was startled. Clearly, Ye Xiu didn't care that Ye Xiu had broken out. Even if he did, it had still delayed him for an hour. If they kept on doing this and maintained this type of delay, then Ye Xiu's goal would be reached. Wind-Following Sword understood this too, but he was no longer in the mood to continue doing this. In his heart he was already the loser, and now the loser had to keep on getting trampled by the other side. How could that be fun? But he would still accomplish their goal. Wind-Following Sword forced himself to look from Ye Xiu's point of view. After replying to Ye Xiu, he renewed his spirits and rushed towards Sin City, while sending his players to search for Lord Grim. If he was going to do it, then he would try his hardest to do it well. Wind-Following Sword changed his attitude and his line of thinking. Sin City. Even though Ye Xiu had successfully escaped from the spinning spiderweb formation, he knew that it wasn't over. He understood Excellent Dynasty's goal, to hinder his progress in the event and prevent him from messing with Excellent Dynasty's lead. They're too crazy. Such a large guild intends on competing with you. Chen Guo was filled with disbelief. There's a lot of pressure as an expert. Even if you don't want to, you can't help but become another person's obstacle. Ye Xiu sighed, making Chen Guo really want to smash his head into the table. Even though he really was an expert, couldn't he be a little bit more modest? As an expert, you obviously won't concede, right? Chen Guo asked. Concede? How? Not do the Christmas quests, Ye Xiu replied. Try a different angle. For example, you can join Excellent Dynasty. For an expert like you, if you're willing, then I'm sure they'll accept. Chen Guo felt that her suggestion was quite good. After all, Excellent Dynasty was her guild. And having her guild get into a fight with her friend didn't seem right, so Chen Guo finally concluded on this. If he joined, then wouldn't everyone be happy? Ye Xiu turned his head to look at Chen Guo. Don't tell me you were sent by Ye Xiu. Ye Xiu had used Chen Guo's account, so he obviously knew that Chen Guo was a member of Excellent Dynasty. Huh, you even know the guild leader? Chen Guo was astonished. Of course. He's the one leading the work in the 10th server, Ye Xiu said. Really? Even the guild leader went to the 10th server to pioneer. No wonder I haven't been seeing him very often. A lot of experts have been coming on less too. Could they have run to the 10th server too? Chen Guo mumbled. Oh, that's a thing. Yeah, look. Chen Guo opened up her Chasing Haze's guild interface. On the guild list, she pointed out a bunch of gray names to Ye Xiu. She also proudly gave them a short introduction. Ye Xiu only quietly listened. He had actually heard of some of these names before. He was once Excellent Era's team captain after all. If there were any experts in the guild, then the guild would definitely report to the team. This was the most established way of finding new players, choosing from the experts in-game. Testing the guild's experts was a task that Ye Xiu had frequently done. All of Excellent Dynasty's top-tier experts had a datasheet of them in the club. Some of them had even been done by Ye Xiu. These types of characters left some impression on him. So it's like that. Now that Ye Xiu saw Chen Guo's guild list, he knew that Excellent Dynasty come to the 10th server in full force. But unfortunately, their guild with their high ambitions met him, who oppressed all of the guilds. Of course, with oppression, there would be resistance. Ye Xiu didn't think that the reactions from the guilds were weird. However, he would also compete against them like so. Shrink back. If he had that thought, then from the very start Ye Xiu wouldn't have brought out his Lord Grimm with the 1000-chance umbrella. So it's like what? Chen Guo was still asking. They're so far ahead in the Christmas event that they dominate the first 15th places in the leaderboard. It turns out that Excellent Dynasty had sent out so many experts. No wonder, Ye Xiu said. You could also be one of them. Completely unaware of the situation, Chen Guo was still trying to persuade him. If I really can't go on any further, then I'll consider it. Ye Xiu smiled. Do you want me to talk to them for you? I'm actually pretty familiar with a few experts. I can persuade them. Chen Guo didn't say it without pride. Ye Xiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Okay. If I need to do it, then you have to help me. Ye Xiu didn't make fun of Chen Guo's good intentions. Chen Guo nodded her head in satisfaction. She then looked at Ye Xiu's Lord Grimm, who was still running around randomly. She couldn't help but ask, from the looks of it, you should hurry up and consider it. It's been almost 2 hours, and how many Christmas thieves have you hunted down? Relax, you can still help. Ye Xiu laughed. When the entire Excellent Dynasty is crying, you can tell Chen Yehui that you can come to my place and persuade me. Your place? You're too arrogant, I'll kick you out. Chen Guo reminded Ye Xiu to pay attention to his status. She was the boss, after all. An employee dares to order her around. If I tell you to go east, then you go east. That's the way it should be. Yeah. Ye Xiu nodded his head repeatedly. In the end, Chen Guo pointed at his screen and yelled, Christmas thief, hurry. I see it. Ye Xiu replied and fired at it. The Christmas thief immediately rushed towards Lord Grimm, but Lord Grimm didn't meet with the thief. Instead, he jumped into the air with an aerial fire and flew onto a rooftop. What are you doing? Chen Guo didn't understand. Aren't Christmas thieves designed in this way? The thief is very evil and merciless. He hid his identity and stole Santa's carefully prepared presents. So as soon as he's been discovered, in order to continue hiding his identity, he will attack the player that has found him to shut his mouth. Ye Xiu said. Sounds right. Chen Guo said. I plan on testing this setup. How are you going to do that? Chen Guo asked. I want to see if he'll continue chasing to try and kill me. Ye Xiu said, and at this moment the Christmas thief chased after him up onto the roof. This Christmas thief was an assassin class. He was good at jumping and didn't even need to climb the walls. At the highest point of his first jump, he jumped again. The Christmas thief leaped onto the roof. Ye Xiu didn't fight. He had Lord Grimm turn around and run and jump to the other side of the street. On this street, there was unexpectedly a Christmas thief sneaking about. Lord Grimm opened up his 1000-chance umbrella and fired at it. How many Christmas thieves do you think there are in Sin City? Ye Xiu suddenly asked Chen Guo. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 280 Gathering a Mob. What are you planning on doing? Chen Guo's tone carried a hint of disbelief. Ye Xiu had aggroed 2 Christmas thieves, but he hadn't gone to fight them, making her feel like he had gone insane. Should we count them? Ye Xiu said. You're crazy. Chen Guo watched, dumbstruck. Right now I count 2 of them. Ye Xiu actually started counting, while Chen Guo continued to watch in disbelief. Is this guy planning on aggroing all of Sin City's Christmas thieves onto his body? Why would he try to commit suicide? 2 Christmas thieves chased behind Lord Grimm. The Christmas thieves' levels, classes, and stats were different, so they moved at different speeds as well. The newly aggroed Christmas thief held a greatsword and really did look like a berserker. His movement speed was relatively normal, but the assassin Christmas thief was clearly faster. However, because Ye Xiu was using aerial fire to fly backwards, he held the advantage in movement speed. Not only were they not getting any closer, they were growing farther and farther apart, up until the point where the berserker had been left behind. If this was any normal monster, Ye Xiu would have already escaped from the thief's aggro range and would then stop being chased by the thief. However, this Christmas thief wasn't going to give up. The thief was quite similar to a dungeon's elite monster. Bang! Lord Grimm once again fired another round, hitting a 3rd Christmas thief, who immediately took out his weapon and began chasing after him. 3. Ye Xiu turned his head towards Chen Guo and reported the number he had counted. Chen Guo had completely turned to stone. She didn't have any reaction. Her head seemed to have already turned into a broken machine. Seeing Ye Xiu act like this, was he serious? There was no information on how many Christmas thieves were in a leveling area. However, the number of monsters in a leveling area had a limit. For example, if the limit was 100, then if there were 100 monsters, a 101st monster wouldn't spawn. If the 100th monster died, then another monster would spawn after a certain amount of time. Chen Guo had guessed what Ye Xiu was trying to do. She had also guessed what the result of his actions would be. However, was it even possible to do what he was planning? Could he guarantee that he could survive having so many Christmas thieves, all of different classes, chasing after him? Wasn't that too much pressure? Number 4. Chen Guo was still thinking when Ye Xiu reported that he had counted to 4. Because of the differences in movement speed, the 4 monsters were chasing after him in different places, but they were still quite a bit of distance away from Lord Grimm. Aerial fire's movement speed was determined by the character's firearm. The higher the physical attack on the firearm was, the greater the recoil would be and the faster its movement speed would be. Ye Xiu's 1000 chance umbrella was considered a rifle with a recoil second only to the hand cannon. It was also a level 25 silver weapon, so its stats were equivalent to a level 30 orange weapon. The movement speed from its aerial fire was exceptional. In addition to his skilled playing, his aerial fire never seemed to stop, except only whenever he needed to land on the ground. It looked as if he was moving backwards in a perfectly straight line. Chen Guo had no way of seeing this type of result through Ye Xiu's first-person camera, though. Otherwise, she would have definitely been astonished. All she could see was that Ye Xiu's playing was quite quick and precise. 5. Ye Xiu continued to count. The number of Christmas thieves that he had gathered became 5, 6, 7, 8. The population in Sin City was sparse. Since Ye Xiu was only looking and not killing, his speed was naturally faster. Not long after, a long line of Christmas thieves were chasing after him, which caught the attention of any players who saw him. That many Christmas thieves in one mob. Lord Grimm's so greedy. Sure, he's greedy, but he's good if he can actually kill them all. No one had yet to figured out Ye Xiu's crazy idea. The players who had seen him had only thought that he was gathering a mob and then proceeding to killing them all at once, which was a common technique for leveling. However, Christmas thieves were quite strong and their respawns weren't concentrated in one area, so most players decided to kill them one by one. Only Chen Guo understood everything. The train that Lord Grimm had created was growing longer and longer. Right now, there were already 18 Christmas thieves. Lord Grimm was completely safe, which was Chen Guo's greatest astonishment. Among these Christmas thieves were long-ranged classes who were firing bullets and magic at him, but none of these attacks affected Lord Grimm's movement speed. While dodging these attacks, Lord Grimm shuffled through streets and alleys in Sin City. While doing this, he had aggroed several Sin City residents as well, but these normal monsters weren't as persistent, and after chasing for a while, they were shaken off. The train was still expanding. As the train passed, Ye Xiu had even met Sima Cheng's cleansing mist. Sima Cheng didn't know about the situation and thought that Ye Xiu had encountered some trouble. She immediately fired at the mob of Christmas thieves. However, these Christmas thieves had the setup where only the first attacker counted, so they wouldn't aggro onto her. The Christmas thieves continued to chase after Lord Grimm and Sima Cheng was still attacking, so Ye Xiu messaged her. "Stop attacking! Stop attacking!" Sima Cheng stopped. "What are you doing?" "Gathering a mob," Ye Xiu replied. "You've already gathered so many, that still isn't enough." "Not enough. I'm going to gather all of the Christmas thieves in the entire city." Along with this, he sent an arrogant smiley face. "Why? It's a competition to see who kills the most Christmas thieves." "So it's like that. Then it looks like there isn't any point to staying here." Sima Cheng wasn't surprised like Chen Guo was because she didn't doubt that Ye Xiu could do this. "Seems like it," Ye Xiu replied. "Though staying here to watch the chaos doesn't sound too bad." Sima Cheng also sent a smiley face. "Then you can go and grab a good spot in advance," Ye Xiu said. "Where?" "At the clock tower." "Oh," Sima Cheng immediately understood, but she didn't immediately go. Her cleansing mist ran in the opposite direction of Lord Grimm. Soon after, she sent a message with her coordinates. "Do you want to play too?" Ye Xiu obviously understood what the message was for. "I'm afraid that I'd mess it up, so it's better if you did it on your own," Sima Cheng replied. Ye Xiu led the train to the coordinates and saw Sima Cheng guarding a Christmas thief, which hadn't yet been attacked. Another carriage was added to the train, and Sima Cheng was now running around helping Ye Xiu find new targets. 30. Ye Xiu had stopped counting out loud, but Chen Guo was still silently counting. 30 Christmas thieves were following behind Lord Grimm now. The train's momentum was growing larger and larger. The footsteps from the train shook half the city block with every road he passed through. Meanwhile, on Excellent Dynasty's side, Chen Yehui had finally received a report. In the beginning, he didn't know about this. He had only been looking at the leaderboards and had seen Lord Grimm's name continue to drop. He had thought that it was because of Wind Following Sword's actions, but he didn't know that, up until now, Wind Following Sword hadn't been able to find Lord Grimm's whereabouts. Only now did someone in the guild talk about Lord Grimm's train. "He's gathered around 20 or 30 Christmas thieves," a player reported. Everyone thought that he was only gathering up a mob. Even Chen Yehui, who knew of Lord Grimm's real identity, didn't even think of such a crazy idea. Has he gone mad from our methods? Is he planning on gathering a bunch of monsters and then killing them? Chen Yehui thought. Should we go and mess things up for him? The Christmas thief train continued to expand. 40, 50. The spectating players finally felt that something wasn't right. There should be a limit to how many monsters he would gather, right? If he continued to gather them, wasn't he just asking to be killed? No one continued to think that he was only gathering them for the sake of gathering them and killing them all at once. However, none of them had any clue what his actual purpose was. Time continued to pass. Lord Grimm's placing on the leaderboards continued to drop, but the number of Christmas thieves behind him continued to increase. Chen Guo was already in complete disbelief. Tang Ru had also noticed and was speechless too. 100, 200. 300. The number of Christmas thieves continued to increase. The number of passengers in the train were enough to fill up an entire street. A full 6 hours had passed. Ye Xiu hadn't left his seat the entire time. He hadn't eaten dinner, nor had he had a drink of water. He hadn't gone to the restroom yet either. All he did was continue with his insane plan and winning Chen Guo's special approval, who personally helped him light up a cigarette. Chen Guo didn't dare interrupt him. Now that things had reached this far, she wanted to see just how far Ye Xiu could take it. Just how many Christmas thieves were there in Sin City? Chen Guo had already completely forgotten about her own character. She was only focused on Ye Xiu's situation now. The pressure of 300 Christmas thieves was quite enormous. Ye Xiu's expression was completely focused. His gaze never left the screen, and he had maintained this concentration for a long time already.